Hello there, and welcome to the planet's memory, where curiosity finds a gentle pace and science is allowed to wander without hurry. Tonight, we're going to drift slowly into one of the most haunting questions ever whispered by human imagination. What if the Earth itself remembers? Not as we do with language, diaries, or photographs, but through the quiet, enduring music of stone and bone. Somewhere beneath us, hidden in sediments and fossils, there may rest the remains of voices that have never truly faded. Perhaps the Earth remembers in silence, in minerals, in patterns, its memory woven not in ink, but in geology. Before we go any further, I want you to consider something simple. Where are you listening from tonight? Are you in the press of the city, where concrete muffles the ground beneath your feet, or somewhere rural, where fields open to sky and soil stretches quietly under starlight? Take a moment and imagine. Just beneath you, not far down in the crust of the Earth, lie fragments of worlds unimaginably older than us. They're not gone, not really. They're preserved as layered stone, as fossil imprints, as isotopic whispers. Each one is a note, a syllable, a chord in a song that has been playing for hundreds of millions of years. And as we breathe now, that song continues, carrying us as part of its score. Fossils are often spoken of as if they are dead things, mere recordings of creatures that vanished long ago. But look closely, with patience, and you might see differently. A fossil is a kind of preserved voice. The ridges of an ammonite shell are like grooves in a record. The long curve of a fern pressed into shale is like a pause held on a page of sheet music. Even isotopes, faintly decaying within rock, are keeping time. They count for us, pulse for us, measure for us the heartbeat of the long ages. This is memory in its purest, quietest form. Not because it tells us every story, but because it lets us sense there are stories still unfinished. When we walk on cliffs made of ancient seabed, we are walking upon silence that was once alive with sound. The Jurassic seas thrummed with life, sharks slicing water, reptiles calling out into the spray, forests of kelp shifting in tidal percussion. We don't hear their music now, not in our ears, but the stone still holds the structure of that orchestra. The rhythms are fossilized, suspended, waiting for us to lean close and imagine again. And what does it mean, truly, for the Earth to remember? Is it memory if no one listens? Or does memory only require existence? The simple endurance of form, no matter if it's observed? Maybe the planet remembers through persistence alone. Dust remembers, rock remembers, even entropy remembers, in the sense that it cannot help but record what time has undone. What erodes is still part of the score. What vanishes is still folded into silence. But silence is not empty. Silence, too, has texture. Emptiness is a shape we measure by what it used to hold. And when we touch stone, when we cradle a fossilized tooth in our hand, when we walk with our bare feet across sand made of crushed coral, we are listening to silence that once roared with presence. It humbles us. It slows us down. It reminds us that memory doesn't always speak. It often lingers in stillness. The Earth's surface is constantly rewritten. Plates grind, mountains rise, oceans sink, landscapes fold into themselves and are remade. This process, called subduction, drags whole regions into the mantle, recycling them into magma and then back out as fresh land. And yet, even in this cycle of forgetting, something survives. Tiny pockets of crust refuse to vanish. Fossils rest in tilted outcrops. Sediments endure in unexpected shelters. There is both erasure and preservation. Forgetting and remembering. The music continues, though its notes are scattered. Consider the air around you now. Every breath you take contains particles of ancient things, carried from the deep past into this moment. Oxygen molecules once used by giant reptiles may still circulate. Carbon atoms exhaled by long-dead forests are here inside your chest. The past isn't locked away. It moves through us constantly. And in a sense, this means we too are instruments of that same earthly memory. Our bodies replaying, without words, the energy of lives that came before. Could that be what memory really is? Not keeping the story whole, but letting it pass through again and again in countless changed forms. And if the Earth remembers, Do we also play a role in that memory? Are we listeners, interpreters, caretakers? Or are we merely passing voices in its greater choir? Our own echoes destined to be preserved as dust, as bones, as technofossils locked away in future layers of stone. It's easy, at first, to see this thought as heavy. But there's something comforting here, too. Because it means none of it is wasted. Nothing is entirely lost. Every particle remains, just scattered, reorganized, softened into silence. Perhaps the planet doesn't remember the way we do. Maybe its memory is less exact, less personal, but somehow more complete. It doesn't need names. It doesn't need language. The Earth remembers through form, through rhythm, through vast, breathtaking continuity. It remembers in the curve of a canyon carved by water, in the faint chemistry of ice cores, in the coral rings that count ancient summers. All of it is a score written not in ink, but in minerals and decay. To imagine this is to realize that we are always surrounded by choruses we cannot fully hear. And so the question lingers, if this much can endure, how much has slipped away? How many voices were erased before being found? How many songs of vanished forests, forgotten climates, extinct creatures, pulse only faintly in isotopes, in dust, in stone, waiting for us to lean close and listen? The Earth remembers, yes, and yet, if this much can be preserved, what else, out of sight, might still be waiting to be heard? Stone does not speak in the way we are used to, yet if we learn how to listen, its silence becomes music. Rocks carry inside them the memory of oceans that once flowed where deserts now stretch, of mountains that once towered before crumbling into dust. Each layer is a stave of deep time, each fracture a pause in the melody of the earth. Rocks do not hurry, and they do not forget. They allow us the rare chance to hear time slowed down into stillness, stretched far beyond the scale of a human life, becoming something closer to eternity. Think of a piece of limestone, pale and unremarkable at first glance, chipped from a cliff. Within it rest the shells of sea creatures that lived in shoals hundreds of millions of years ago. Their bodies, once fragile and fleeting, hardened, compacted, pressed together until their chorus transformed into stone. Each shell is a note, woven into the choir of sediment. What was soft became enduring. What was temporary became eternal. It is as if their song was written down not to be heard at once, but to wait, patient, hidden, for us to place an ear against the rock and imagine what once was. Mountains, too, carry symphonies in their roots. Folded strata are the score of ancient collisions, recording the deep rumble of tectonic plates as they pushed against each other, molding the very backbone of Earth. The Alps, the Himalayas, the Andes, all mountains rise like frozen crescendos. The music is still ongoing, though we experience it too slowly to notice. We see mountains as unmoving, eternal, yet they are swelling, grinding, eroding even now, always composing. Their song is played in measures so vast we can only ever catch a whisper of it, a hint of its rhythm in a falling rock, in wind echoing through a valley. Sometimes those songs appear polished like marble. Marble is a transformation story. Limestone, long pressed under weight and heat, becomes crystalline, luminous, more than it was. To carve marble is to touch remade seashells, to shape the compressed choir of long-dissolved lives. Think of that. Statues and temples of marble, gleaming in human history, are themselves shaped from the bodies of ancient oceans, turned into art twice over. A civilization listening to the memory of stone without even naming it as such. Each crack, each fossil, each grain of sediment is a voice in the geological orchestra. Sandstone holds whispers of ancient deserts, dunes hardened by pressure into monuments of silence. Shale carries the drumbeat of mud, settled under still waters, layer upon layer building until entire pages of deep time are bound together. Even volcanic rock tells its story differently. Cooled lava is a percussive strike, a sudden ringing note, a reminder that sometimes the Earth's music surges in bursts of fire and then cools into silence again. What is remarkable is that all of this persists, long after seas vanish, long after forests petrify, long after creatures lose their names. Stone holds the record. Not because stone chooses to remember, but because the earth itself cannot help but leave traces of its songs. Just as we might recall a faint melody heard in childhood, rocks remember seas long gone, heat long cooled, voices long extinct. And in this way, geology becomes more than science. It becomes memory's instrument, patience's scripture. Standing by a cliff face, you are standing in front of an archive. Each line is a measure, each fossil an instrument, each mineral a tone that plays too slow for human ears but resonates across eons. What you see is not only a wall of sediment. It is a frozen choir, a book turned vertical, a composition still unfolding beneath layers of time. Could it be that the ground beneath us sings continuously, and we simply lack the senses to perceive its full soundscape? Or is memory itself the only instrument by which to hear such silent music? And yet, if stone can hold entire seas, entire forests, entire vanished days, what else might it have recorded that we have not yet learned to read? If stone carries the frozen chords of Earth's memory, then erosion is the steady hand that rearranges those notes, dissolving some, scattering others, blending them into new compositions. Wind and water, patient beyond all measure, carve through mountains, hollow valleys, and softened cliffs. Their music is quiet but constant. A grain of sand loosened from a rock face, a raindrop falling into a canyon, a river meandering through a plain. Each motion is a beat in a rhythm that never ends. Time moves slowly in these measures, yet always forward, as erosion becomes the percussion of dust and silence. Think of the way a desert wind carries particles of stone across great distances. Each grain is a note broken free, carried into the air to strike against another surface, to scrape, to polish, to wear away. Over centuries, dunes shift and dance, their shapes reorganized by air. To us, this becomes the faint hiss of sand moving underfoot, but in deep time it is the whisper of landscapes rearranging themselves. Once jagged, now smooth, once whole, now dispersed. Erosion does not destroy, it reassigns. What falls away in one place gathers in another, forming beaches, riverbeds, fertile valleys. It is not the end of the song, but a modulation of its tone. Water shapes more intimately. Raindrops, though small, repeat themselves endlessly, forming streams that carve gullies, rivers that cut through limestone, canyons that open like vast instruments. The Grand Canyon itself is a river's masterpiece, each wall a resonance chamber of ancient sea, volcanic ash, compressed desert sand. For millions of years, the Colorado River has been bowing gently across stone, layer after layer, revealing what is old while creating something new. If you stand in such a canyon and listen closely, the rush of water is not only present sound. It is also the echo of its deep-time work, the song that carved the silence. Even glaciers leave their music behind. Moving like slow rivers of ice, they grind valleys into U-shaped curves, drag boulders across bedrock, leave striations etched like grooves in a record. When the ice retreats, what remains is a land smoothed by patience, scarred yet harmonious. The silence of ice is deceptive. It is not absence but pressure, the soundless hum of continents reshaped under a frozen hand. Erosion is also the soft exhalation of rain on soil, the dispersal of minerals into the sea, the recycling of mountains into beaches that glisten with quartz or shells. We might see it as loss, but in erosion nothing is truly lost. Dust lifted into the sky by storms travels halfway across the world, nourishing distant forests. The Sahara's dust feeds the Amazon. Rock carried off by rivers eventually becomes seafloor, pressed into new sediment. In this way, erosion is Earth's breath, inhaling and exhaling landscapes, moving memory from one page to the next. If geology writes permanence, erosion plays improvisation. It is fluid, shifting, endless. A cliff once sharpened by uplift becomes rounded. A mountain chain breaks down to hills, then to plains. Seems at first like fading, like entropy. But if we look deeper, we see movement instead of absence. Erosion is the transcriber making sure the score of Earth never stops, even when it changes form. What if, in this ceaseless rhythm, we see reflections of ourselves? We too are shaped by pressures, by forces quiet and unseen. We too are worn down, polished, rearranged by the steady winds of time. Our memories erode, details soften, moments blur, yet the essence remains, shifted into new patterns. Not because we fail to remember, but because remembering is also a kind of weathering. Identity, like cliffs and valleys, is never fixed but always being reshaped. So perhaps erosion is not the silence that follows music, but the breath within it, the pause between tones, the rhythm that allows movement. The percussion of dust, the brushstroke of wind, the cascade of rainwater into stone hollows. These are Earth's softer instruments, less dramatic than eruption or quake, yet no less enduring. They play slowly, almost invisibly, but their song can be read in coastlines, in mountains worn to ruins, in the slow smoothing of stone beneath your hand. And yet, if the patient work of erosion rewrites every measure of the planet's music, how much of the original song still lingers? What patterns of stone and silence keep the chorus alive, even as the score is endlessly undone? If erosion is the breath of Earth, dissolving landscapes into new arrangements, then isotopes are its heartbeat, slow, steady, and nearly invisible. Atoms themselves become instruments of memory, holding within their structure a secret record of when, and how, and for how long. They do not write in stone or carve in rivers. They hum in silence, deep within matter, carrying traces of time that pass unnoticed until we learn how to listen. Every element in the world has its subtle variations, delicate siblings slightly different in weight or energy. These siblings, called isotopes, are like faint notes harmonizing beneath a melody. Carbon, oxygen, uranium, strontium. Each leaves a distinct vibration in the fabric of memory. They linger quietly, their ratios shifting across millions of years, telling us how oceans rose and fell, when climates warmed and cooled, how creatures once breathed under unfamiliar skies. At first glance, atoms seem too small to carry such grand stories. And yet they do. Consider carbon-14. It is formed high in the atmosphere by cosmic rays, then absorbed by plants, by animals, by everything living. When life stops, when breath quiets, the carbon-14 inside begins to decay at a steady rate, like a clock that cannot be touched. By measuring what remains, we can count backward, tracing the span of ancient lives. Bones and charcoal, wood and shells, each becomes a transcript of its own age, marked not by ink but by atomic rhythm. In this way, isotopes are timekeepers, ticking softly in the silence of decay. Then there is oxygen-18, a heavier version of the oxygen we breathe. Locked in ice layers or seashells, its presence reveals ancient temperatures, climates long past. The ratios of oxygen isotopes shift with the warmth of the oceans, with the rhythm of rainfall, with the breath of glaciers advancing and retreating. In the layered snow of Antarctica and Greenland, these isotopes line up like bars in a score, giving us a measure of time stretching back hundreds of thousands of years. When we read them, we don't just know numbers. We can imagine air cooler, denser, carrying more ice, and then slowly warming again as the great cycles of climate turned. Strontium provides another songline, tracing stories of migration. Different rocks, formed in different regions, hold unique blends of strontium isotopes. When living creatures drink water or eat plants from a certain land, those isotopes build into their bones and teeth, silently recording the geography of their journeys. From fossilized teeth, we discover the path of mammoths moving from valley to valley, or the migrations of early people as they wandered rivers and plains. A creature might die thousands of years ago, but in its teeth the landscape remains present, its isotopic chords still humming. Uranium, with its slow and steady decay into lead, marks vast stretches of deep time, calibrating the very ages of the Earth. Some crystals are billions of years old, and in their isotopic balance lies the birth date of our planet's crust itself. A note so faint, so low, that only careful instruments can hear it. But the song is there, unwavering, persistent, a bass line beneath all of history. In this way, isotopes are hidden notes, never obvious, never loud, but essential in holding the structure of Earth's composition. They are the ticking within silence, the underlying rhythm that makes sense of the larger symphony. Without them, we would not know when the oceans retreated, when the forests spread, when great extinctions paused one melody and began another. They are not the fossils themselves, not the cliffs or shells, but the tuning forks that help us hear the pitch of time. And perhaps there is something beautiful in the fact that memory can be carried at such a tiny scale. While mountains collapse, rivers shift, forests burn and regrow, atoms remain steady archivists. They do not announce themselves, but when we pay attention, they whisper from the smallest spaces about the grandest of events. From the weight of isotopes in a drop of water we can glimpse the pulse of ancient seas. From the balance inside bone ash we can find the air that filled lungs long vanished. It humbles us, this reminder that history is not only preserved in what we see, but in what we cannot, in vibrations so subtle that only listening in patience reveals them. Is it possible, then, that the Earth's truest memory is not in stone or fossil alone, but in the quiet physics of matter itself? That beneath every visible trace of the past lies a more profound archive, inaudible to our senses but inscribed into the very particles of being? If memory exists at this atomic scale, perhaps nothing ever truly disappears. It only shifts, decays, transforms into new ratios, new harmonies, keeping the record complete. And so, isotopes remind us that time itself holds shape, that silence is never empty, that every particle carries not just mass but story. When we hold a rock or a fossil, when we measure its atoms, we are not simply learning about the past. We are joining a conversation still ongoing, one that began with the earliest oceans and will continue long after our own voices have faded. And yet, if such hidden notes exist in every atom around us, humming softly, waiting to be heard, how many symphonies of Earth are we still deaf to, still unable to read, still waiting to discover? If isotopes are the hidden notes of Earth's memory, then fossils are its refrains, solid, tangible echoes of voices that have fallen silent. A fossil is more than stone shaped into form. It is a moment of soundless singing, captured and kept. Shells, feathers, bones, and footprints each belong to a chorus that once rang out vibrantly in the Jurassic air. Now they hum faintly from stone, harmonies frozen into the mineral fabric of time. When you hold a fossil in your hand, small and quiet though it may seem, you are holding a fragment of performance, an imprint left by something that once lived, breathed, and contributed its own voice to Earth's symphony. The lines of a fern pressed into shale were once green leaves trembling in a forest breeze. The curve of a jawbone once opened to call across a swamp or crack the shell of prey. Even a ripple of skin impressed into mud, later hardened into rock, carries a sense of movement and sound. Though time has silenced the original vibration, the shape remains, like a choir score with its notes still visible even if no singer stands before you. Fossilization is rare, almost miraculous, for the conditions must line up just right. An animal or plant must find itself swiftly buried, perhaps in sediment from a flood, ash from a volcanic eruption, or silt drifting down in a seabed. Layers of earth protect, press, and eventually mineralize what once was soft. Bit by bit, organic matter is replaced, dissolved, or filled in by stone until the living form is transformed into permanence. Feels like silence, like finality, but in truth, it is a different kind of voice. A long note carried far beyond its natural span, a soundless echo bridging the abyss of time. Imagine a dinosaur feather, captured in amber, still delicate in every filament. It no longer beats in the air, no longer shakes with warmth or wind, yet it still sings of flight, of life lived under prehistoric skies. Imagine an ammonite shell spiraling inward, its chambers once filled with seawater and gas, regulating buoyancy. To us, it is only a pattern preserved. Yet the spiral itself has rhythm, geometry, harmony. Each fossil holds both absence and presence. Absence of sound, of softness, of life, and presence of structure, of endurance, of message. Even the smallest fossils, microscopic pollen, or plankton pressed into limestone, carry their part of the chorus. They are hums and whispers, supporting the deeper voices of bones, teeth, and trunks petrified into stone. Taken together, they create harmony. The layered voices of an entire vanished biosphere, still resonant enough for us to read. Some are loud in their clarity, like the skeleton of a massive sauropod. Others are faint, nearly lost, like a fern pattern blurred in mudstone. But together, they become a chorus that spans millions of years, a polyphony of memory hidden in stone. And when we uncover them, what do we really hear? Perhaps not the original sound, but something else. Our imagination stirred, our perception bent toward remembering what we never personally knew. We stand in front of fossils in museums, silent and motionless under glass, but our minds bring them to life. We hear the call, the rustle, the stomp these creatures might have made. Perhaps this is the truest form of their chorus now, inspiring memory in beings who were never witnesses to their songs. There is also a deeper humility in fossils. They remind us that survival is not victory but transformation. That in order to endure across millions of years, something soft must give itself over to stillness. Something fleeting must let itself be turned to mineral. It is both loss and permanence at once. A fossil is not the living thing, but it is not nothing. It is something in between, an echo caught in stone. Could it be, then, that fossils are less about what they show and more about what they awaken in us? They invite us to imagine what silence conceals. They allow us to glimpse the blend of absence and endurance, how time erases one kind of being only to preserve another. They are memory carved into matter, songs turned silent but still legible. And in that silence, there remains music still, waiting to be heard not by ears, but by thought, by presence, by wonder. And yet, if such vast choirs can linger in silence for so long, how many voices remain buried still, unheard, waiting beneath the ground and beneath the seas, their echoes not yet drawn into the light of listening? Fossils are memories caught in stillness, yet water tells of memory in motion. Rivers, ancient and unending, do not carve in silence by absence, but by continual murmuring. They move with patience, folding time into winding paths, etching valleys, carrying fragments from one place to another. In their ceaselessness, rivers remind us that not all songs are frozen. Some sing forever, shaping the world as they travel. Imagine standing beside a river at night, listening not to its roar, but to its undercurrent, the quieter tones, the whisper of its steady push along the banks. Now stretch that thought across millions of years. Picture rivers long vanished, flowing where deserts now stand. Their courses, though dry, still press into the land as valleys, gullies, oxbows, meanders etched so deeply they remain visible even without water. It is as if the memory of the river hums in the bones of the earth, whether or not the current is still present. Rivers have always been archivists as well as sculptors. In every grain of sediment they wash downstream is a record carried forward. Ash from a volcanic eruption, silt from a glacier's melt, pollen from vanished forests, the bones of creatures swept away. Each becomes part of the water's memory, layered in floodplains or delta mud, filed carefully in the seabed at journey's end. To read those layers now is to open a river's diary, a history of flowing patience. Migration itself is threaded through their courses. Animals have always followed rivers, for drinking, feeding, traveling, crossing distances on paths designed by water. So too with humans. Civilization after civilization grew along their edges, leaning into their steady presence for trade, for farming, for life. In river valleys we hear footsteps crossing time, echoes of migrations unseen but recorded in soil layers, in pollen trapped within sediment cores, in isotopic traces left in teeth and bones. A river is both path and witness, its voice growing louder or softer but never truly silent. Geologically, a river's song is not random but patterned. It meanders, bends, swings wide in great arcs, then cuts new channels, leaving behind oxbow lakes, crescents of remembered paths. To look at a river plain from above is to see the handwriting of water across land, paragraphs of loops and bends spelling out a chapter that continues, unfinished, into the horizon. The earth never erases it completely. It folds it into new sentences as each shift adds to the old. And rivers are more than liquid. They are time held in suspension. A handful of river sand contains crystals eroded from mountains, some formed when continents collided, others from volcanic fire long cooled. Each particle is far older than the hand that holds it, made new because the river carried it onward, allowed it to rest among its countless siblings. In every stream bed lies a blend of ages, a choir of minerals gathered by water's memory. Perhaps this is why rivers feel eternal to us. We see them moving and call them the same, though no drop is ever repeated. We say, almost as a proverb, that we cannot step into the same river twice. And yet the feeling is that the river endures, unbroken, continuous. A serpent of motion, winding through the silence of land. Identity, persistence, memory. The river demonstrates them all, while showing they are as fluid as water itself. And what of the rivers now lost, buried under shifting continents, swallowed by deserts, or subsumed beneath glaciers? If their beds remain carved into stone, are they still speaking? Does the valley alone hold the hum, even in the absence of the current? Perhaps rivers do not need flow to endure. Perhaps form alone is memory. A bend, a cut, a gully in the rock is enough for the earth to hum the refrain. There was water here, there was movement here, there was song here. And yet, if rivers carve and carry, if they write in both presence and absence, how many forgotten currents are still folded into the ground beneath us, the quiet lines of vanished waters holding songs we have not yet learned to hear? Rivers whisper, fossils hold their frozen choruses. But beneath them all, deeper than any valley carved in the crust, there is another kind of sound. One that is not delicate but pulsing, primeval, and untamed. The earth itself has a heartbeat, and in the Jurassic Age it was heard in the drums of volcanoes. When magma rose toward the surface, when pressure found release, the planet beat out its rhythms in fire, in ash, in molten stone pouring into the seas. Volcanoes do not speak softly. They roar like percussion, sudden and unstoppable. Yet even their violence folds into the greater music of time. Picture the world in that era. The continents had not yet taken their places as we know them today. Tectonic plates stretched and shifted, cracking open expanses wide enough for magma to pour out. Great volcanic provinces shaped the landscape, releasing smoke into the heavens, ash across forests, rivers of lava glowing in scarlet veins against the Earth's skin. To us, such an eruption seems an ending, a catastrophe. But in the symphony of Earth, it was both drumbeat and renewal, destruction followed by creation. Volcanic soils, once cooled, grew lush with life. Entire ecosystems flourished on ground born from fire. The drumbeat sometimes deafened, but it always deepened the song. When we look now at frozen lava, hardened into basalt plateaus, we can almost hear the echoes of that rhythm. The way magma cooled in waves, ripples locked forever in stone. Each black rock face is a drumskin struck once and held still, its resonance trapped in silence. Volcanoes write suddenly, but what they leave is permanent. Crystalline patterns, mineral veins, pumice light as bone, ash compressed into tuff. These are not ruins of chaos, but chords hammered out in tempo, reminders that the earth itself moves in cycles of pressure and release. Lava fields tell us time's heartbeat in their chemistry. In trapped bubbles of gas, we read of ancient atmospheres. In layers of ash, we find pollen, insects, and fragments of plants recording the world that fell beneath that burning sky. Even fossilized charcoal speaks of forests ignited in volcanic fire. Their voices ended in an instant, yet preserved as blackened testimony. Each eruption deposits not just destruction but record. The beat is heavy, but it remembers. It is humbling to imagine magma flowing below us still. Chambers hot, restless, waiting. Though we cannot see them, seismic vibrations reveal their presence. We feel tremors beneath our feet, low percussive notes of Earth's restless core, telling us the drumbeat has never stopped. The Earth is not silent but always alive, its molten veins pulsing in the invisibility of depth. We may walk a quiet valley, stand at the edge of a dormant cone, and think the music has ended. Yet silence is deceptive. The beat continues in secret, a rhythm too slow and deep for us to always notice. This is why volcanoes hold so much paradox. They are endings and beginnings intertwined. Ash clouds once dimmed the Jurassic sky, cooling climates, altering the course of evolution. Entire species may have vanished under their weight. And yet, without those fiery outbursts, new life would never have taken hold in new soil. Entropy and renewal, silence and percussion. It is all one rhythm, endlessly cycling. Could it be that volcanoes are more than geological processes, that they are the Earth's way of speaking to itself? A planet's need to breathe, to exhale heat that built up over time? In their vast, terrible music, they are also intimate. Each eruption a reminder that beneath the surface we walk upon lies a molten world, both dangerous and sustaining. To imagine that heartbeat is to feel smaller, yes, but also connected, as if our own pulse is just an echo of a larger percussion running through all matter. The memory persists, even where fire burned out long ago. Basalt cliffs stand dark against coastlines. Islands formed entirely from eruptions still rise from the sea, their shores ringing with waves but remembering flames. Even underwater, along the mid-ocean ridges, volcanoes still create new land in silence, their eruptions unseen by human eyes. The Jurassic was filled with such drumbeats, but they were not unique to that age. The heartbeat continues. We stand upon it without knowing. And yet, if the Earth's heart still drums below us, unread, how many rhythms of fire are still waiting to be uncovered? Written in basalt, locked in crystal, echoing through valleys that carry the imprint of lava long gone? The steady drums of volcanoes remind us that the Earth is never quiet, always reshaping itself, always rewriting its song. And yet, for every sound inscribed into stone, there is another sound that disappears. Here lies one of the most haunting mysteries. Does the Earth truly remember, or does entropy, in its endless drift, wash all songs away? The layers of rock and the fragments of fossil speak both truths at once. Memory preserved and memory lost. Stone can hold images of seashells, forests, rivers. Yet stone also erodes, fractures, melts, subducts beneath the crust, and returns to magma. In that recycling, memory is erased. A fossil preserved for millions of years can be shattered by weather in a single moment, reduced to dust that carries no trace of the once living voice. Entropy whispers over every archive. What was ordered must collapse back into disorder. This is not a failure of Earth, but the nature of time itself. And yet, before the collapse, there is endurance. Mountains last for tens of millions of years, valleys for even longer. Minerals hold isotopic ratios that outlive civilizations. Meteorites preserve whispers from before Earth formed. The cosmos remembers, not in stories but in physics, not in details but in persistence. Even entropy, in its slow dismantling, cannot erase that something once was. It only softens it, scatters it, makes it unrecognizable. Memory fades in precision, but not in existence. Perhaps this is why geology feels both comforting and unsettling. Look at sedimentary layers exposed in a cliff, lines drawn one atop another, each laid down in calm patience. They are memory made visible, but unseen, deeper still, those same records may already be slipping into oblivion. Subduction plates swallow continents whole, dragging down the archives of life to be recycled as molten rock. Compact chapters, entire lost books of the Earth's memory, erased before anyone could read them. What lies beneath the Himalayas, or beneath the ocean's deepest trenches, is a library we will never touch. Entropy is, in a way, time's editing hand. Not every note survives. Not every chorus endures. Some become whispers, others become silence. And yet, silence, too, is part of memory's shape. For when something is gone, we do not simply lose it, we remember the absence itself. The missing voices form a background hum against which surviving voices seem sharper. Fossils seem miraculous only because we know how much could not be fossilized, how much slipped away into nothing. The symphony of Earth is built as much on missing chords as on the ones we still hear. Is it possible that memory, then, is not about absolute preservation but about resonance? Just as a sound lingers in the ear even after the note dies, Earth holds resonance of vanished worlds, even if not the full detail. Not recording every leaf, every cry, but carrying enough for us to sense what is gone. Enough for us to sit before a fossil or a canyon wall or a basalt cliff and realize that something immense has passed through here. A memory reconstructed from fragments is still a memory, even if entropy has blurred its edges. Entropy is patient. It moves with rivers of time, wearing down mountains to plains, plains to sand, sand to dust. But against it runs the persistence of memory, stone, fossil, isotope, echo. Which will win? The answer may be neither. Perhaps the Earth exists as a balance between remembering and forgetting, holding some chords for a long while, letting others fall into silence, never keeping the whole. If so, maybe memory itself is not a single act of remembrance but a shifting, breathing process. A weaving that relies equally on what is kept and what is lost. And if entropy does eventually dissolve every ordered form, every fossil, every rock, if even the Earth one day fades back into dust circling a star long dead, then the memory does not vanish into nothing. It transforms. Dust still carries story. Atoms still hum with isotopic signatures. Even in the most complete erasure, something lingers, if not for us, then for something else that may come after. The chorus never truly disappears. It disperses. We might ask ourselves, if memory is never absolute, why do we ache so deeply for it? Why do we seek it in fossils, in stone, in the deep ice of glaciers? Perhaps because as humans we live within such small spans of time. We feel entropy rushing past us, eroding our days. To find deep time inscribed in earth is to feel less perishable, less fleeting. It is a reminder that memory, in some form, always stretches further than we can see. And perhaps Earth remembers differently than we imagine. Not one coherent narrative, but layers upon layers of overlapping songs, some lost, some repeating, some merging into silence. Just as memory in our own minds falters, misplaces, revises, so too may the planet remember imperfectly. The structure remains, but the details blur. The story endures, but not all its voices. So we stand between preservation and forgetting, between stone and dust, between notes that still linger and chords already erased. And in this balance we glimpse something humbling, that memory itself may be less about permanence and more about the rhythm of what endures against the tide of what dissolves. And yet, if even entropy can't erase everything, if some voices always linger, waiting in fragments, how many forgotten songs of earth might still be present, unheard, folded into silence so deep we have not yet learned how to listen? Memory and entropy weave their balance, allowing some voices to endure while others fade away. But there are moments in Earth's long composition when the song does not merely soften or blur. It stops. These are the pauses, the rests, the abrupt silences carved into the score of life. Extinction. When entire choruses end at once, when whole harmonies vanish, the Earth's music shifts into quiet before a new theme takes hold. Extinction appears sudden from the view of deep time. In the unfolding of millions of years, it can seem less like a drawn-out change and more like a single beat cut short. A species that thrived for ages may fall away as if silenced mid-song. Entire families of creatures, once abundant, vanish so completely that no echo remains except for fragments in stone. We often picture extinction as tragedy, and in a way it is, but it is also transition. A pause is not emptiness, but preparation for the next phrase. The great extinction events break history into chapters. The end Permian, often called the Great Dying, silenced more than 90% of marine life, along with countless forests and animals on land. The Cretaceous extinction, more familiar to us, removed the dinosaurs from their central stage, leaving space for mammals to rise and write a different refrain. From the silence came transformation. If not for that pause, our own voices may never have appeared in the symphony at all. What causes the pause? Many things. Shifts in climate, glaciation, volcanic outpourings that cloaked the air with ash, the strike of an asteroid sending shockwaves across the planet. Different instruments, but the same result. A silence that spread through ecosystems, unweaving food chains, breaking the cords that tied species together. Extinction is not just the absence of individuals, but the sudden collapse of relationships, the predator without prey, the plant without pollinator. The music of life is fragile in ways we rarely notice until the pause has already arrived. And yet, if extinctions are rests in Earth's song, they are not rests without meaning. Just as a pause in music shifts attention, deepens emotion, and prepares the ear for new sound, so extinction clears the stage for new forms of life to enter. After forests fall, grasslands spread. After great reptiles decline, birds emerge as their feathered inheritors. Extinction removes voices, but it does not erase the score entirely. It opens space in which Earth writes again. Still, the suddenness of loss is haunting. Imagine the Jurassic skies alive with wings, cries, and movement, forests trembling under the calls of creatures now forever gone. Then imagine the quiet after. An entire octave stripped from the chord, leaving emptiness where sound once roared. What does that silence feel like to the Earth itself? Can a planet grieve? Or is grief simply our own echo of imagining what is lost? In a way, the fossils we uncover are the only lingering notes of those halted songs. Each tooth, each shell, is not just a record of existence, but a reminder of the silence that followed. Fossils are half-presences. They show us who was once here, but they also carry the absence of all those that never left a trace. For every creature we can name, there are countless more erased completely, their part in the score vanishing without a single note preserved. Extinction reminds us of everything we will never recover, entire melodies we will never hear, entire harmonies erased by time. And yet, silence is not final. From silence emerges a different kind of music, the murmurs of survivors, the seeds of adaptation, the threads of resilience. Evolution continues even in pause. What seems like collapse becomes invitation for transformation. Could it be that extinction is not the end of the symphony, only the interval between its movements? That silence itself is a form of expression within the planet's greater song. We might also ask what role we play now, as witnesses living in an age where extinction is no longer only planetary but human-driven. Our presence alters rhythms, silences species, removes harmonies more quickly than geology ever did. Are we listening closely enough to understand what silences we create? Or are we moving heedlessly, adding pauses into the score that Earth may not be ready to resolve? Extinction, then, lingers as paradox. Silence that is also renewal, loss that is also opening. It unsettles us because it mirrors our own fate. We too are temporary voices. We too will one day pause, leaving only faint echoes for the layers of silence to hold. Perhaps that is why extinction feels so profound, not only because it marks the loss of ancient chords, but because it reminds us that pauses belong within every song, including ours. And yet, if extinction is silence, if it is a pause before something new, what new music is the Earth even now preparing to write in the absence of what has been lost? If extinction is the pause, then the ocean is what continues beneath it, an endless choir that rarely ceases, spanning both silence and song. Beneath the Jurassic seas, long before our own voices entered the score, the waters were alive with sound. Clicks, pulses, currents, vibrations felt through bone and shell. Creatures sang not always with voices, but with movement, ripple, collision. Even now, deep beneath layers of sediment, the memory of those sounds endures as faint vibrations, reduced, refracted, still humming inside limestone. The ocean was the first resonant chamber of Earth, its waves amplifying rhythms of wind and tide, its depths carrying the calls of creatures across unimaginable distances. Whales were not yet present in the Jurassic, but reptiles swam vast stretches of sea, their bodies slicing through currents with low, thrum-like signals carried in water's density. Fish clattered with scales, crustaceans tapped against shells, and the very shifting of the tide was its own percussion. If we could drift backward into those waters, close enough to listen, we might hear something like a choir, layered, polyphonic, never-ending. Over millions of years, the ocean's voice was captured, transformed, and stored. Tiny plankton, falling after death, built up chalky sediments. A chorus of single-celled singers layering themselves into limestone cliffs. Coral reefs, once ringing with life, hardened into stone cathedrals that still stand, though the voices that built them are long silent. Even the texture of limestone beneath your fingers carries the resonance. Seashells long dissolved now fused into an enduring wall of memory. The ocean does not keep its music in recordings nor instruments, but in structure, in chemical whispers, in the transformation of shells into stone. Drop a pebble into water, and the rings spread outward. So it was with the Jurassic oceans, each movement, each song carried, spread, multiplied. The presence of isotopes within seawater even now reveals how temperatures shifted, how ice advanced and retreated. Oxygen atoms, carbon fragments, hydrogen ratios, all still hum the rhythm of ancient seas. They are voices so subtle, so quiet, that only with delicate instruments can we hear them again. Yet they endure, telling us not just where water flowed, but what it held, what it moved, what it kept alive. Life itself finds refuge in these resonances. For every extinction, the oceans always offered continuity. Their choir adapts, shifts, finds new harmonies. After great silences, new voices rise. If one coral reef perishes, another begins to grow nearby. If one species disappears, others fill the vacant space. Ocean choirs are eternal not because they never lose singers, but because they never stop rearranging the harmony. This is why walking along a shoreline today feels strangely ancient. The waves sound familiar to ears that have only ever lived for a few decades, because the pattern itself is older than memory, millions of years older, carried endlessly forward. But even eternal choirs face silence of their own. Oceans preserve and erase with equal touch. While limestone holds echoes of shells and reefs, entire groups of creatures were dissolved into invisibility. What is preserved is only a glimpse, a harmony halfway remembered. Could it be that most of the ocean's music was never recorded in stone at all, only performed in the moment and then absorbed back into the water? If so, what we hear in sediments is not the full choir but its faintest refrain. We listen with awe, aware of how much we will never recover. And yet, the sea has always carried memory in its currents. Dust from deserts travels upon wind, enters oceans, sinks into depths. Rivers exhale their sediments into estuaries where they mingle with salt water and drift into new formations. In this way, oceans gather voices not only from their swimmers but from the entire planet. Valleys, volcanoes, mountains, forests, all eventually washing into the same choir of salt and tide. Earth's waters keep a memory larger than the oceans themselves, a collection of every rhythm that ever touched them. Even now, when we press an ear to the edge of the coast, the sound of the tide is not only waves but resonance across time. Echoes of the Jurassic seas repeating through the same elements. Salt has not changed, nor has the rhythm of tide pulled by the moon. We are listening not just to the present, but to an unbroken continuity, vibrations repeated through epochs. And if oceans are eternal choirs, then what of us? When we stand at their edge, we become audience, listeners, brief witnesses to a music that never ends. Our breathing joins the metronome of waves. Our heartbeat finds rhythm in the tide. Perhaps this is why oceans feel like both lullaby and hymn. They are singing to us, but more profoundly, we are simply returning to their song. A song we were always part of without knowing. And yet, if oceans have always carried memory, always layered voices into endless choirs, how much of their music still remains unheard, folded away in silence as deep as the trenches where light itself cannot follow? If the oceans are choirs of depth and resonance, then dust is their echo in miniature, fragments set free to drift upon air. Dust is not absence, nor emptiness. It is memory reduced to its smallest form. Each mote that floats in sunlight holds within it some hidden archive. The ground-down bone of long-vanished animals, the pollen of flowers that bloomed in forests long gone, the ash of volcanoes that reshaped continents. Dust, quiet and unnoticeable as it seems, is a library of voices scattered, still traveling, still writing themselves into new pages of the Earth's score. We see dust and often think of decay, of neglect, of endings. But dust is persistence, the last form that matter takes before slipping back into the cycles of soil, water, and air. In deserts, dust storms lift entire histories into the sky, carrying minerals and organic fragments across oceans to fall upon lands thousands of miles away. It is said that the Amazon rainforest, so lush and teeming with life, is fed in part by dust blown from the Sahara, ancient particles of dried seabed turned airborne, crossing the Atlantic to deliver forgotten memories of one world into the flourishing breath of another. Volcanic ash becomes dust too, scattered into the stratosphere where it can dim sunlight, cool climates, and leave subtle changes in snow and ice. Later, that ash settles, compressing into soils or layering into sedimentary stone. To study its isotopes and crystals is to track time as precisely as reading a clock. To look closely at dust is to see that nothing ever really disappears. It only becomes small enough to drift, to travel, to rest once more. Fossil dust exists as well, ground from ancient shells, coral, and skeletons by waves that would not let memory sit still. Microscopic flakes, invisible to the eye, fall as soft rain into new seas, where they are buried again, preserved, or dissolved into yet another form. To imagine dust is to picture particles endlessly circulating. A dinosaur's bone becomes powder, the powder becomes sediment, the sediment becomes rock, then dust again. The song never ends. It only lowers its volume until we have to lean in to hear it. Human beings carry a quiet intimacy with dust. The air we breathe is filled with it, each inhalation a mingling of past and present. We breathe the remains of meteors, soil, volcanic ash, spores, tiny fragments of once living things. Dust rests on our shelves, our windowsills, our books, but it is older, far older, than any room it accumulates in. To hold a speck of dust is to touch fragments of stars. Some particles have circulated since the earliest days of the solar system, unchanged except by the journeys they have taken. And perhaps this is what makes dust so moving, that it is memory uncontained, free-floating, never fixed to a single time or place. Dust remembers everything but belongs to nowhere. We might wipe it away, dismissing it as nuisance, but even then it only shifts, disperses, waits for another surface to settle upon. It reminds us that memory cannot always be pinned down neatly. It drifts, it resurfaces, it slips through our hands and yet never leaves. Could it be that dust is the Earth's most honest form of memory? Not structured like cliffs, not striking like fossils, not vast like oceans, but subtle, fragmentary, impossible to own completely. Dust teaches us that preservation is not only about clarity but endurance. Fragments matter, whispers matter. Small pieces drifting through the currents of air are enough to keep the story alive, even if the story is never told in full. And yet, if every mote is a library, if each particle carries its own fragment of vanished voices, then when we breathe it in, when we see it glowing in the shaft of sunlight through a window, how much of Earth's forgotten music is already resting quietly inside us, unspoken, unseen, but still present. Dust drifts, settling into new places, reminding us that even fragments participate in memory. And yet, behind dust, behind oceans, behind fossils and flame, there is a deeper rhythm still, the long breath of the planet itself. Climate has never been fixed. It shifts like an orchestra tuning its instruments, first warming, then cooling, expanding, retreating, adjusting the pitch of life's chorus. These cycles are not chaos. They are structure, a metronome guiding Earth's music across spans we can scarcely fathom. The Earth tilts, it wobbles, it shifts its orbit. These subtle, almost invisible changes alter how much sunlight reaches the poles, how seasons lengthen or shorten, how ice advances or retreats. Over thousands of years, these rhythms, called Milankovitch cycles, set the pace of glaciations. Ice sheets swell, grow heavy, then melt away, releasing oceans to rise again. The scars of these movements remain in valleys carved by glaciers, in sediments filled with cold water fossils, in isotopic whispers frozen into ice cores. To study them is to learn that climate is not driftless. It breathes with intention, a slow inhale and exhale stretching across millennia. Even the oceans sing in climate's key. Currents carry heat around the globe, delivering warmth to frozen places, drawing cold into the tropics, shifting rainfall and drought. During warm periods, corals spread across shallow seas, their rings recording seas that shimmered with life. During colder ages, forests pulled back, replaced by grasslands where new animals rose. Fossil pollen trapped in lake beds preserves these transitions. Layer by layer, they tell us of climates moving like symphonies. Crescendos of warmth, rests of cold silence, then crescendos again. And within these echoes we see life answering. Species adapt to new rhythms. Some migrate, following warmth or food across continents. Some shrink or expand in size. Others vanish, unable to match the tempo. Extinction and emergence alike are linked to climate's pulse. The pattern is undeniable. Whether in seas or on land, each life has always danced to this metronome, whether it realized it or not. Carbon, too, speaks in climate's language. In times of warmth, it rises into the air, enriching the atmosphere. In times of cold, it is drawn down into oceans, into soils, into frozen ground. Ice cores drilled from Antarctica reveal bubbles of air trapped for hundreds of thousands of years, each one a measure of the atmosphere as it once was. Within them, you hear the faint rises and falls of carbon dioxide, like breaths recorded in glassy silence. When read carefully, they show warming and cooling not as accidents, but as rhythm, a pattern of balance in flux. And yet, the rhythm has never been perfect. Sudden events, the strikes of asteroids, massive volcanic outpourings, collapses of circulation in the oceans, have interrupted the flow, resetting the meter, changing the key. These abrupt shifts remind us that while cycles guide, they do not rule unchallenged. Still, after every disruption, the metronome resumes, ticking patiently onward, warming and cooling again as it has always done. Climate does not forget its pattern. It waits, then continues. If you close your eyes and imagine the Earth not in centuries but in millions of years, you might hear it differently. Not as weather reports, not as sudden seasons, but as a long, steady hum. Glaciers expanding like drawn-out notes, deserts swelling and shrinking like chords struck in succession, rainforests appearing, dissolving, appearing again. The pulse becomes almost hypnotic, steady as a heartbeat, deep as the slow percussion of tides. There is humility in realizing that we are small compared to these scales. Our lives take place within moments of weather, flashes of seasons, the edge of a single beat. But the Earth continues to breathe beneath us in its fuller cycles, rising and falling, warming and cooling, adjusting its tone across eons. Perhaps this is why climate, when thought of as rhythm rather than catastrophe, feels less like threat and more like vast reminder that nothing is static, not ice, not forests, not seas. Everything bends and breathes with planetary time. Could it be that memory itself is written in this pulse? That the reason we find echoes of warmth in coral, or whispers of ice in sediments, or rings in trees reflecting summers and winters, is because the Earth carries its long inhalations everywhere, impressed upon every living thing? We are, each of us, records of the climate that formed us, our bones holding the isotopes of the water we drank, our cells carrying the mark of the air we breathed. We too are written into the metronome. And yet, if climate is rhythm, if the Earth breathes in such enduring cycles, then what new melody might it be composing now, as the metronome repeats, but with our voices, our choices suddenly pressing themselves into its song? The echoes of climate remind us that Earth has always moved in long, patient rhythms, warming and cooling, erasing and remaking. Each cycle brings change, and change carries silence as well as song. This invites us to wonder, what does it mean when the silence includes not only forests and seas, but civilizations? What if our cities, our cultures, our voices, are only temporary instruments in the Earth's orchestra, bright, resonant, and yet destined to fade into dust, leaving behind only faint traces in the larger score? Already, ruins tell us this story in whispers. Along river valleys and deserts, the stones of past societies still stand in fragment. The toppled temples of Mesopotamia, the half-buried pyramids, the roads of empires once thought unbreakable. They are not entirely gone. They echo quietly. To walk among such stones is to hear a civilization's voice folded into silence, a verse now complete. And yet what is left is only part of the song, stripped of its percussion of daily life, the languages that no longer rise, the songs unsung, the laughter and footsteps long vanished. The architecture remains like the bones of music with the flesh of sound removed. Geology does not forget easily, even with civilizations. Our structures, though transient on the scale of deep time, leave fingerprints. Concrete, brick, glass, plastic, steel. Each becomes candidate for future fossils. Already, geologists speak of technofossils, signs of human presence pressed into Earth's fabric. The shards of bottles buried in landfill, the remnants of roads once paved across continents. Even microplastics, now scattered in sediments and ocean floors, will endure like faint notes in stone, telling some future listener that we once lived here. Our age may be preserved not in monuments of grandeur, but in fragments of waste, the dust of industry, the persistent hum of carbon layered into ice and soil. Speculation stretches further. What if we are not the first? Could there have been civilizations before us, lost so deeply to time that only subtle notes remain? Perhaps entire epochs could rise and vanish, erased by entropy, swallowed by tectonic plates, buried under oceans. Their songs silenced so completely that only those who listen with imagination might ever wonder. Our ruins feel eternal to us now, but in 10 million years, what will they be? Shards, fragments, misunderstandings in stone? Or nothing at all, erased by the patient tide of erosion and volcanic rewriting? Civilizations, like species, emerge and vanish in the greater composition. They sing briefly, they build harmonies, and then, whether by climate shift, by collapse, or by choice undone, they fall into silence. Yet their remnants linger as faint notes in valleys and caves, in the tilt of stone overgrown with moss, in the chemistry of soil where metals once settled. Forgotten ages are not entirely forgotten. They live in the materials they leave behind. The silence after them is not emptiness but resonance, a reminder of a verse that has played and passed. It is tempting to imagine Earth as indifferent to these voices, our songs and ruins alike only passing accidents upon its surface. Yet perhaps the truth is more layered. Perhaps every civilization becomes part of the larger score, adding its own resonance before resting. Not because of grandeur, but because even silence is meaningful. Even an abandoned city, covered by vines, becomes harmony when read as part of the Earth's enduring refrain of memory and erasure. Futures drift before us, speculative and strange. Will our skyscrapers one day become petrified bones of a new chorus? Will satellites, orbiting until they fall, join meteors as fragments scattered across the crust? Will future geologists of another species sift through the technofossils of our age the way we examine trilobites and ammonites? We cannot know, but the more one imagines it, the more natural it feels. Civilizations do not escape entropy. They are voices like all others, loud in their moment, then silent, then remembered, then misunderstood, then folded back into the background hum. To think this way is humbling, but also strangely comforting. It allows us to see ourselves not as exceptions, not as permanent rulers of Earth, but as participants in a larger orchestra that stretches across epochs. Our notes are brief but vibrant. We add our harmony in plastic, metal, stone, story, and then we, too, recede, leaving the silence for what follows. Silence is not defeat. It is simply part of the rhythm. And so the Earth's score swells with fragments of civilizations, both known and imagined, remembered through stone and silence. Ruins hum beside fossils. Technofossils hum beside basalt. Dust drifts with ash, carrying human stories as lightly as it carries pollen and bone. Our memory, too, is folded into the same fabric as rivers and volcanoes, as isotopes and glaciers. To the planet, our presence is not louder, only different. Another verse in the song that has no end. And yet, if civilizations rise and fall like instruments in Earth's orchestra, If their voices become stone and silence, what of our own song now? Are we aware of how it sounds in the greater score? Or are we only playing blind, unaware that others will one day hear us as nothing more than faint echoes? Civilizations leave their traces in stone and silence, but deeper than ruins, longer than stories. The earth has another way of writing time. Grain by grain, silt by silt, a patient script known as sediment. Here, the planet teaches us its most enduring language. Layers of dust, mud, and sand are pressed together into lines like musical staves, each boundary a note, each shift a rhythm in the endless score of landscapes. Sedimentation is slower than thought, quieter than memory, yet the most complete archive of all. Consider a floodplain where a river loosens soil and carries it downstream. As the waters slow, the heaviness settles out, first gravel, then sand, then the finest silts. Each layer is a pause, a measure. Over years, those layers build their own story, revealing when the river swelled with warmth, when it thinned under ice, when volcanoes upstream choked it with ash. Sediments are not just mud pressed into silence. They are voices carried, dispersed, arranged until they form a text no one alive could ever write. Lakebeds preserve this language especially well. Year by year, a thin film of silt falls to the bottom, almost imperceptible. Light layers in summer, darker lines in winter, repeating again and again. These are called varves, seasonal bands, quiet and faithful. In them, scientists can read past climates. The brightness of summers long vanished, the breath of winters colder than we can imagine. It is as though the lake itself has held a diary, written patiently in alternating shades, keeping time for tens of thousands of years. Oceans, too, speak through sediments. Tiny shells sink in endless snowfall from the surface, building thick blankets of ooze on the sea floor. Over millions of years, these microscopic remains compress into chalk and limestone. The white cliffs of Dover, for instance, are nothing less than countless sea creatures pressed into a vertical hymn. Each grain is a life, and together, they are choir turned into cathedral. Sediment here is not just language but architecture, pages bound into stone. Even deserts, barren as they seem, tell their story in layers of sand. Winds move dunes, stack them, bury older patterns beneath new skins. When hardened through time, these layers become cross-bedded sandstone, their angles still carrying the memory of shifting winds. To read them is to feel the breath of climates long past, the movement of air that once danced across ancient landscapes. Sediments speak in detail but also in silence. In some layers there may be abundance. Pollen, shells, charcoal, spores, all waiting quietly, filling the lines with meaning. In others, there is absence, a blankness that says just as much. Perhaps drought, perhaps loss, perhaps a silence in the ecosystem itself. Just as music is not only sound but rests, sediment is not only matter but also the marks of its interruption. And like any language, sediments require translation. We learn to read them slowly. A band of ash is not only color but volcanic memory. A sudden change in chemistry might mean a meteor strike. A shift in pollen content whispers of forests replaced by grassland that called for different animals to rise. Grain by grain, sediments rewrite extinction, migration, eruption, survival. They hold it all, not in loud pronouncements, but in fine print pressed under water and earth. What makes sediment so powerful is patience. It does not hurry, and therefore it does not forget. While mountains crumble, while civilizations collapse, sediments keep building. Time collapses into stone so slowly that each page of earth becomes both memory and oblivion. To us, they seem like simple deposits. To the planet, they are handwriting. And perhaps that is the deeper lesson. To realize that the earth writes constantly, not in books but in grains. That nothing falls without record. That every particle finds its place, pressed into patterns long after we are gone. We write our history with language. The planet writes with sediment. Both fade, both distort, but both carry enough of what matters to remain readable, at least in fragments. And yet, if sediments are the Earth's diary, vast and ongoing, How many of its pages still lie buried, unopened, unread, holding secrets of worlds we have not yet even imagined? If sediments are the Earth's diary, the long and layered record kept in silence, then forests are its living strings, vibrating with music still unfolding in the air. In the Jurassic, forests stretched across vast lands, dense and green, rising with ferns, cycads, and towering conifers. Their canopies swayed in the wind like harps strung by unseen hands, each leaf trembling as though it were a string plucked by the breath of the world. The sound was not only rustling and whispering, it was a choir of countless lives, insects humming in their hidden chambers, reptiles calling from the branches, creatures unseen moving among the roots. Imagine standing beneath such a canopy. The air would carry the hum of cicadas, the flutter of wings, the hiss of foliage struck by sudden breeze. Forests were not silent then, and they are not silent now. Each sway of a leaf, each crack of a branch, each note of birdsong or reptilian call added to the symphony. These canopies were chords without end, vibrating not from a single instrument but from millions of overlapping notes. Living matter turned into constant resonance. Through amber fossils, we still glimpse fragments of that music. Drops of resin, hardened over millions of years, preserve the smallest of players. Insects with their wings spread as if mid-flight, tiny spiders caught in threads, even grains of pollen suspended like golden dust. To hold a piece of amber is to hold a small section of that concert, frozen in perfect clarity. It carries not only the shapes of vanished forests, but also the vibrations of their daily life, like a string plucked long ago still trembling faintly through silence. The canopy itself was an instrument of the atmosphere. These trees released oxygen into the Jurassic skies in great abundance, changing the composition of the air. Their music was more than sound. It was chemical, planetary. Oxygen levels shaped how creatures breathed, how insects grew to sizes unimaginable today, how fire itself spread more easily through the undergrowth. The forests tuned their environment constantly, their breath becoming part of the larger orchestration of Earth's climate and life. To walk through their shadows would have been to hear the planet's composition not only with ears, but with lungs and with blood. And the strings of the forest were not limited to sound. They were light, too, the way canopies filtered the sun, turning bright radiance into a green cathedral glow. They were touch, the softness of moss, the coarseness of bark, the hidden vibrations of roots connecting underground in a network that hummed with quiet exchange. Even then, networks of fungi linked trees together, moving nutrients, balancing signals, allowing the forest to function almost as a single breathing organism. What we hear above is only half of the song. Below, a deeper bass line carried through soil and root, binding trees to one another in unseen resonance. But forests, even in their vibrancy, are never outside entropy. They fall, they burn, they petrify. Some of their chords were silenced in sudden fire, flames hungrily consuming leaves and would only to leave behind charcoal, a blackened memory pressed into sediment. Other trees fossilized, transformed into stone with their rings still visible. To walk through a petrified forest today is to pass through silent strings carved into rock, frozen in mid-resonance, their voices muted but still present. What once swayed as music now stands as sculpture of sound captured in stone. And yet, despite loss, forests renew. They breathe again, they grow again, they weave fresh harmonies into the planetary score. What was true in the Jurassic is true now. The living strings still hum, different in species and in form, yet loyal to the same role: to turn wind into music, light into chemical rhythm, silence into resonance. Forests may change their instruments, but the song continues without end. Could it be that this is why we find peace beneath trees even today? Because the canopy carries an ancient memory of sound, one that reaches beyond our human span, stretching back into eras when dinosaurs themselves lifted their heads among the leaves. The hush, the rustle, the chorus of insects still playing. It is all resonance across time, a continuity of living music connecting past and present. And when we hold amber in our hands, or step through petrified trunks, or listen to the sigh of leaves and wind, we are catching glimpses of both frozen and living strings, The echoes of chords struck long ago and the bright notes still played. The forests remember, even if they do not speak. Their memory is not words, but vibration. And yet, if strings as vast as forests can still carry resonance across millions of years, how many other instruments of the Earth's music remain vibrating, faint and endless, waiting for us to listen closely enough to feel? The forests hum with strings, the oceans carry choirs, the volcanoes beat out their drums. But no symphony is complete without silence. Between the notes lies the pause, the stillness that gives shape to sound itself. Silence is not absence. It is part of the composition. And the earth, like the sky above it, has always known how to fold silence into its music. In the Jurassic nights, before human eyes ever looked up, the stars wheeled brightly against a sky untouched by city lights. Their silence mirrored the brief hush of the world below. Creatures may have called to one another. Wind may have shuffled forest canopies. Tides may have pulled at coastlines. Yet surrounding it all was a larger stillness, cosmic and complete. It was a pause that framed every earthly sound, lending weight to the smallest chirp or rustle. Stone carries this silence too. Canyons, cliffs, and deserts hold an acoustic presence that is more noticeable for what it lacks. Walk into a canyon at dusk, when winds settle and the air cools, and you will find a silence that feels almost alive. It amplifies your own heartbeat, your own breath. The hush of stone is not void, it is memory stilled. Every echo has already departed, every note already faded. What remains is a stage cleared, waiting for the next voice to arrive. The silence between stars and stones is not separate from music, but its counterbalance. Stars themselves burn furiously, yet the distances between them are so vast we hear nothing of their fire. They appear as points of quiet light, notes suspended in stillness across the sky. Stone, too, is full of movement at scales too vast for us to sense. Tectonic plates grinding, atoms vibrating, elements decaying, but to human perception, it is experienced as silence. The earth and the cosmos mirror each other in this way, each filled with energy invisible to our ears, each giving us silence that is not absence, but scale. Perhaps that is why silence so easily humbles us. Looking into the night sky, we sense time stretched so far it cannot be measured. Standing in a desert where sound disappears, we perceive distances so wide they dissolve our voices into nothing. Silence is the reminder that music does not belong to us. It is larger, slower, older, deeper. Silence teaches us to listen differently, to hear not only what is present but what is withheld, what lies between. Fossils know this silence. Each one is an echo preserved, but the creature itself is inaudible. What remains is a form without breath, a note without vibration. And yet, in that stillness, we can imagine sound. The silence is what awakens the ear of the mind. When we cradle a shell turned to stone, we sense the ocean muffled inside it, not because it speaks, but because it is quiet. Silence here is invitation, not ending. Could it be that the Earth's greatest memory is carried less in its resonant voices than in its silences? The silence of ice holding bubbles of vanished air. The silence of caves spacious enough to record the drip of water for millennia. The silence above treelines where wind alone speaks across rock. Each silence is a pause in the song, but a pause with weight, contour, meaning. Without it, the sound would blur into noise. With it, the music breathes. The night sky has always been a mirror to this truth. Stars glimmer within silence so vast it presses on our thoughts, slowing us, stilling us, reminding us that Earth's choir is not the only one. The galaxy itself has its pauses, its rhythms, its rests. Our own planet sings inside a universe of silence, caught between roars of fire at its core and the hush of infinite dark above. It is a strange comfort to realize that silence, too, is part of this symphony, that nothingness is necessary, that the space between matters as much as the notes themselves. Silence has power because it asks us to bring something of ourselves. To hear a rush of water, we need only ears. But to hear silence, we must give attention, imagination, patience. We must be present. Silence is always asking, what do you bring into this pause? What meaning do you find when nothing speaks? The earth and the stars, together, hold that question open for us each night, each time we stand still long enough to notice. And yet, if silence is not emptiness but part of the music itself, if the pauses are just as vital as the sound, how many silences has the earth already played for us? Silences we walked past without listening, silences that may be carrying deeper notes than we have ever known to hear. Silence, as we have seen, is not absence but a pause, a breathing place in the music of the earth. Yet there is another force, deeper and more inevitable, that pushes all sound toward dissolution. The name we give it is entropy. It is the gradual unraveling of order, the slow dispersal of energy, the fading of every harmony into static. If a forest is a harp and the ocean a choir, then entropy is the steady hand that loosens the strings, detunes the instruments, and lets the music fade into background hum. Entropy does not strike suddenly, though at times it feels like it does. Instead, it works quietly. Painted walls weather into dust. Songs once sung are forgotten by ears that no longer exist. The intricate bones of ancient creatures lose definition, crumble into particles too small to carry their shapes. The earth, left alone without memory's resistance, trends always towards scattering, dispersal. The more organized the chorus, the more certain it's dissolving. This is not cruelty but law, a rhythm of the universe itself, carried from stars down into the smallest stone. Even the grandest choirs fade. The Jurassic seas once filled with reptilian calls have fallen silent. The forests that rang with insect hymns have burnt, fossilized, or eroded into soil. Each layer of sediment was once music in motion, now compressed into pages we can only partly read. In every canyon carved and every valley cleared, entropy has leaned forward, softening the edges. What once roared is reduced to whisper, what once whispered dissolves into stillness. This is the fading choir, and yet, the question lingers. Does it completely fade? Do echoes ever vanish entirely? Or are they reduced simply into new forms, new arrangements of sound too quiet for most listeners? The laws of thermodynamics suggest that while energy scatters, it is never destroyed, only transformed. Every note, then, still lingers in some altered form. The song is not lost, but shifted, dispersed beyond recognition. Chorus turned to static, melody diffused into background hum. Consider ruins overgrown with grasses. The walls collapse, the structures erode, but the stones remain. A city may fade into soil, its memory carried no longer in shining streets but in chemical shifts beneath farmland. Archaeologists may one day find shards, clays, isotopes, the faint molecular residue of human presence. Entropy erases the form, but it cannot banish the trace. The fading choir hums differently, quietly, but it hums all the same. Or take a river. Over time, the river erodes its own valley, carrying away stones that once formed its bed. The old channels seem abandoned, yet the eroded fragments reappear in beaches, in deltas, in ocean layers. The river's music has not stopped. It has transformed. The choir may sound different, indistinct, dispersed, but it has not fallen fully silent. This is how entropy works with Earth. Not by annihilation, but by scattering sound into whispers scattered everywhere. Even isotopes are reminders of entropy's patience. Uranium becomes lead, radioactive decay humming at its slowest tempos, atoms reshaping themselves with perfect inevitability. And still, from these transformations, we read the ages of rocks, the temperature of past climates, the breath of ancient air. Entropy dissolves one music, but in doing so, it carves out another, the background pulse of time measured in decay, the static that, when trained upon carefully, is not formless at all but full of meaning. Could it be, then, that entropy is not an erasure of the choir, but its transformation into a form too vast or too quiet for us to comprehend? If every sound is recycled, if every particle of memory is scattered into new configurations, then perhaps the Jurassic still lingers, not as fossils alone, not as stone or echo, but as dispersed resonance drifting through us all. Carbon once exhaled by a sauropod may now move in our bloodstream. The calcium of an ancient reef may now hold up a mountain ridge, or the walls of our own bones. Jurassic music still plays, just not in ways we can always recognize as song. And yet, entropy humbles us because it denies permanence. It reminds us that everything we hear, everything we hold, everything we build will one day fade. Our own civilizations, our voices, our words, may leave traces, but they too will scatter. The Anthropocene choir will soften into background noise, its ruins buried, its plastic and steel transformed. The entropy of memory is universal. Just as the planet faded the music of the trilobites, so too does it promise to fade our own. But there is a strange comfort in this dispersal. Entropy assures us that nothing is ever truly removed. It only changes form, joins a broader chorus, dissolves into universal hum. If the Jurassic choir is no longer distinct, it has not gone missing. It has become the soil beneath our feet, the air in our lungs, the dust floating in beams of light. Perhaps the earth remembers through entropy itself, not as sharp notes preserved forever, but as resonance spread thinly, endlessly everywhere. And so the question deepens. When all ordered sound turns eventually into static, does the choir truly fade? Or do we simply lack the ears to notice that the music still surrounds us, reassembled, scattered across silence, stitched invisibly through dust, stone, and sky? And yet, if the fading choir lingers still, if entropy only transforms and never annihilates, can we say the earth forgets it all, or is all forgetting itself just another kind of memory, too vast, too subtle for us to understand? Entropy reminds us that every choir fades, every chorus disperses into static. And yet scattering is not complete erasure. Something always lingers, which leaves us to wonder, what of us? What of our own age? Loud with machines, bright with wires, saturated with plastic. If the Jurassic whispered through shells and the oceans carried their choirs into stone, then perhaps the Anthropocene will one day leave its own music pressed into sediments. What if our objects, our machines, our discarded fragments, become the future fossils, an industrial harmony layered into Earth's score? Already, the evidence is building. Plastics swirl in oceans, break into microscopic fragments, and sink into seabeds. They will last for millennia, immune to decay, strung like unexpected notes into sedimentary lines. Concrete, poured in vast oceans of gray, will harden and crack, but much of it will endure, and when buried, it too may compact into future strata. The metals we mine, bend, and scatter will not vanish either. Copper wires, steel beams, alloys engineered for strength. They may corrode, but their echoes will persist, transformed into mineral veins incomprehensible to future listeners. Our technofossils are already writing themselves, whether or not we wish them to. Imagine a distant epic millions of years ahead. The continents shifted, climates altered, oceans grown new shorelines. And beneath it all, a strange layer of stone. Fragments of plastic colored and warped, glass melted into conglomerates, concrete pressed into unnatural strata, electronics reduced to shimmering dust of rare earth metals. To future eyes, these sediments will look unlike anything before or after, strikingly unnatural, an industrial fingerprint in the slow score of Earth. They will speak of us, though perhaps they will say less about who we were, and more about what we left behind. This is the irony of permanence. The songs we most value, our voices, our art, our stories, may vanish. Languages will dissolve. Paper will decompose. Recordings will erode. But the remnants of waste may endure. Our traces may not be remembered primarily through poetry or music, but through polymers, alloys, isotopes of nuclear fire locked into rocks. Not songs carried to the stars, but bottles in landfills, rebar in stone, and synthetic chemicals embedded in clay. Earth may remember us not in words, but in chemistry. Perhaps this is its own kind of chorus. For sediment knows no hierarchy of value. A feather trapped in mud rests beside volcanic ash, beside shards of shells, each given place, each equal in memory. In the same way, a plastic fragment in the future may rest beside a fossil bone, a circuit board beside crushed coral. Sediments make no distinction. It is all Earth's handwriting. Which leaves us with the haunting thought: what story will our technofossils tell? What chord will they strike in the symphony of deep time? Some scientists already name this future line in stone: the Anthropocene layer. It may become one of Earth's most identifiable chapters, separating past natural rhythms from the sudden and sharp disruptions of human industry. Carbon traces from fossil fuels marking the air. Radioactive isotopes from nuclear detonations pressed into soils. Metals concentrated far beyond natural abundance. These are not guesses. They are already measurable, already humming in geology's composition. The note of our presence has already begun sounding in Earth's record. Could it be possible, then, that long after we are gone, long after our cities dissolve, the planet itself will continue singing our verse, not in language but in sediment and mineral? If someone or something comes after, will they read our presence as we now read ammonites or trilobites, stone-locked testimonies of vanished eras? Or will they misinterpret, just as we often do? Perhaps our traces will seem almost mythological, evidence of a people who wrapped the earth in metal and wire, then fell silent for reasons unknown. There is humility in realizing that our most enduring monuments may not be cathedrals or satellites, but the synthetic dust of our age. And there is also a strange continuity. Just as the Jurassic left its impressions in coral cliffs, so too will we leave impressions, though ours are stranger, more artificial alloys and polymers stitched into stone, a man-made harmony folded into Earth's natural chorus. Technofossils may sound alien compared with shells or bones, but they are no less part of the same score. Memory accepts every note, so perhaps the true lesson of technofossils is not despair, but perspective. They show us that we are not outside the story, not separate from the layers beneath us. We are already inscribed. We will be remembered, though not as we expect. And just as we search the silence of past epochs for meaning, perhaps one day, far into the future, others will lean close to our layer in the stone and wonder, who were they? What was their song? How did their harmony fade? And yet, if our machines and plastics and metals are destined to become part of Earth's choir, then what melody, strange or beautiful, are we composing now, knowingly or not, for the listeners who will someday hear us only through silence and stone? Our technofossils may one day hum within sediments, but the Earth already speaks in deeper resonances, echoes carried through stone itself. Mountains are not silent. Beneath their icy ridges and weathered cliffs, they ring with seismic tones. Every tremor, every quake, every subtle shift is a note released into the fabric of the crust. Geology has its echoes, sounding not in moments of life but in vibrations of the planet remembering its own movements. To imagine this music, you must think not in the scale of ears but in the scale of instruments vast beyond comprehension. The Himalayas are still rising, still pressing upward as India collides into Asia. Each centimeter of growth is pressure building within rock, pressure that must someday release, vibrating outward as seismic waves. These vibrations travel like ripples over water, except their medium is stone. Waves moving invisibly until felt as movement beneath our feet. The earthquake is not chaos. It is resonance. The rocks shifting back into balance. The earth striking a deep and brief chord against its own body. Seismologists measure these echoes with delicate sensors, reading frequencies inaudible to us but clear in their instruments. Some waves are sharp, sudden, fast like drumbeats. Others are slow, rolling, like a low chord stretched across minutes. Each earthquake tells a story. The fracture of a fault, the grinding of plates, the slipping of mountains. To listen to them is to realize that the earth itself is constantly playing, adjusting, sending tones through its lithosphere, tones that pass unnoticed until amplified by the trembling of surface. But echoes are not only violent. Even in stillness, the earth rings faintly. When wind whips across mountain ranges, when waves crash endlessly upon shores, when glaciers crack and calve into seas, vibrations travel through the crust. Tiny tremors, so subtle they cannot be felt, accumulate into background noise, a geological hum. Scientists call it microseismic activity, but one could just as easily call it the soft background of Earth's symphony, an ever-present undertone shaping the silence. This is the long resonance, a note that has been playing incessantly as far back as memory reaches. Imagine standing in a canyon after a quake. The cliffs still hold their echo. The rocks have shifted, but the vibration recorded itself into their very fractures. Over millions of years, these echoes accumulate, fault lines crossing continents, rift valleys spreading wider, mid-ocean ridges opening like long and unfinished chords. The landscape we see is not just static form but frozen resonance, the stillness left after vibrations have passed. Mountains curved and folded, gorges broken open, coastlines uplifted. All of these are echoes of seismic notes too deep for us to hear, but powerful enough to rearrange the score of continents. And could it be that these echoes carry memory? If every tremor writes itself into cracks, if every quake shifts the placement of stone, then geology is less silent ledger and more dynamic songbook. To walk on fractured ground is to walk upon notes once struck, echoes still cooling in the silent aftertone. What is a mountain but an archive of echoes? What is a valley but their resonance traced visibly? We are surrounded by sound already played, its vibrations long since ended, its marks left as silent chords in stone. There is humility in this. Our human instruments, fragile and delicate, last only centuries before crumbling. Yet the Earth's echoes last eons. The tectonic memory cannot be erased so easily. Each shift adds to the unfinished composition. Volcanoes leave their frozen drums, yes, but earthquakes ripple through, connecting them, weaving vibrations into fabric. In this sense, mountains are not monuments, but resonant chambers, holding and releasing echoes across millions of years. Seismic echoes also ripple outward through water and air. Tsunamis born from earthquakes carry a different kind of vibration, reaching across whole oceans before crashing back into stone coasts. The sound may fade, the roar may silence, but the scars etched in harbors and deltas remain. Even silence records vibration, just as an empty instrument still carries resonance after its strings are plucked. Could the earth then be understood as a vast memory drum, struck again and again, its surface bearing echoes layered upon echoes, each overlapping, none lost completely? We hear only the surface tremors, the notes that reach our fragile senses. But deep within, the earth is always vibrating, always resonating with hidden tones, an unfinished music that outlasts us all. And if this is true, if every tremor, every ripple, every broken stone carries memory, then the earth is never silent. It hums beneath us, a record we live upon but rarely notice. Every step we take on rock is upon echoes already played. Every mountain we see is a note struck too long ago for ears, but still sounding in form. The world, in this way, is unfinished symphony. Its echoes waiting, its vibrations ongoing, its memory still unfolding in time too vast to comprehend. And yet, if all that we walk upon is echo, if every stone rings from memory of past vibrations, then how many more notes are still hidden beneath us, trembling in silence, waiting to be heard by those who will one day know how to listen differently? The earth carries echoes in stone and vibration, but what of us, the listeners? Are we truly hearing the Jurassic when we press our thoughts against fossils, strata, and memories of worlds gone? Or are we only imagining it, piecing together fragments into a song that fits our desire to listen? Time, after all, folds perception. What seems like memory may only be illusion, and our own attempts to join the Earth's symphony are delicate, fragile, easily colored by our longing. The truth is that human time is short. We live for decades, perhaps a century at most. Against the sweep of millions of years, our hearing is thin, like catching one measure of a vast orchestra and trying to guess the full composition. Geological time is incomprehensibly deep, but we shrink it into stories and metaphors, into timelines on paper, scales in museum halls, into the neatness of names like Jurassic, Triassic, Cretaceous. These divisions help us imagine, but do they capture the full song? Or are they only ways of stitching together echoes into something we can hold? Memory itself is unreliable even for the self. We recall fragments. We reshape them. What we think we are remembering, we are often inventing anew. guided by traces but filled with invention. It may be the same for how we listen to Earth. We hold a fossil in hand and hear the voices of its time. Yet those sounds are our construction, a human harmony laid over silence. We cannot hear the actual cries of reptiles, the rush of Jurassic forests, the percussion of ancient seas. We imagine them. We project them. Perhaps that, too, is music, an illusion of listening that lets us participate in something too vast to grasp directly. And time itself tricks perception. When we gaze into the night sky and see stars, we are looking into the past. Every point of light is not as it is now, but as it once was years or centuries ago. With geology, the trick is deeper. Fossils give us the shapes of lives that ended tens of millions of years before our kind appeared. Strata expose climates we never lived through. We interpret them as memory, but in truth we are hearing muted echoes, translated through stone and isotope. The true music has already faded, but an illusion arises when we hold its remains. We feel as though we are still hearing it. Perhaps that is what listening to time really is. Piecing together illusions drawn from fragments, a fragile act of imagination laid against silence. And maybe this is not a failure but the only possible way. For if we could truly hear all of time at once, every voice, every vibration, every layered echo, it would not sound like a song. It would be overwhelming, incoherent, endless. Illusion refines it into something bearable, something meaningful. Just as silence shapes music, perception shapes time. What we hear is incomplete, but it is enough for wonder. And yet, the incompleteness also humbles. We can never know if what we imagine is close to truth. Was the Jurassic forest louder than the present one, filled with voices beyond our conception? Were the oceans more resonant, their creatures carrying songs in frequencies far removed from our range? We do not know. We can only reconstruct, compare, hypothesize, and then listen with imagination. This is the illusion, the fragile bridge by which we cross into worlds we cannot fully recover. It teaches us both how much we can explore and how much must remain mystery. Time folds perception in other ways as well. For the Earth, a million years may feel like a heartbeat. For us, it is uncountable. Stones are patient. Stars are patient. We are not. What feels eternal to us may be only a single note to the planet, a hum already finished before we noticed. Our illusions stretch those notes into fuller chords, turning fragments of stone into imagined symphonies. In doing so, perhaps we honor them, even if we cannot truly replicate their sound. So are we hearing the Jurassic at all? Perhaps the answer is both yes and no. Yes, because fossils, isotopes, sediments, and stone all carry real traces, real notes struck in time long before us. And no, because what we make of them is illusion, filtered through memory's fragility and imagination's hunger. But in that balance, part truth, part dream, we find wonder. And maybe wonder itself is the purest way of listening that we have. And yet, if time itself folds our perception, if all we hear is half memory and half illusion, then what grander symphony of Earth might still exist beyond our reach, playing even now, but in tones too slow, too subtle, too vast for us to ever recognize as music? Time plays its illusion, folding memory and perception together, leaving us unsure of what is truly heard. And beneath those illusions lies one of Earth's most profound choirs, the oceans that long ago transformed into stone. Ancient seabeds, once alive with motion and sound, became symphonies compacted into calcium, pressed over millions of years into chalk and limestone. To walk along cliffs of white or gray, to place a hand upon their surfaces, is to touch remnants of oceans turned to soundless choirs, their voices fossilized into silence. Picture the floors of the Jurassic seas, where shells and skeletons, plankton and coral fragments rained down in slow snowfall through the water. They drifted gently, almost invisibly, one by one, until they formed a thick blanket over the seabed. Layer after layer, century after century, the accumulation grew, a quiet burial of bones and shells, each fragment adding its note to the chorus. What seemed like decay was rehearsal for permanence. What seemed like silence was the beginning of stone. Over deep time, the weight of water, of sediment, of tectonic movement pressed this ocean debris into forms that endure still. The great limestone ridges, the monumental chalk cliffs, the reefs turned into rigid testament. When we walk on such stone today, it is easy to mistake it as solid, featureless, heavy. But in truth, every block of limestone, every chalk wall, is composed of innumerable voices. Microscopic shells of plankton, spiraled shells of ammonites, spines of sea urchins, skeletal fragments of long-vanished reefs. All have been written into the mineral script. To the eye, it looks uniform. To the imagination, it is an orchestra layered so densely that no single note can be heard, only harmony pressed into stillness. These seabeds are music transformed into geology, oceans lifted into cliffs, voices that once swam now standing upright along the edge of land. Consider the chalk cliffs of Dover, brilliant white against the sea. Their radiance comes from coccolithophores, tiny planktonic organisms that lived in Jurassic and Cretaceous oceans. Billions upon billions of them, falling after death, created a record visible from miles away. In their time, each was infinitesimal, barely tangible to the creatures around them. Together, they became an archive vast enough to be landscapes. It is humbling to realize that cliffs towering above us are built not from singular force, but from accumulation of the smallest presences, the whispers of plankton layering themselves into timeless stone. Even our bones, composed of calcium phosphate, belong to this same choir. There is continuity between us and the oceans. The material of our structure once flowed through seas, cycled through reefs, moved with the shells of uncountable beings. When we stand before limestone or chalk, we look, in a sense, at our relatives. The kinship is not direct, but mineral. Our skeletons may one day join the same choir, folded into sediments, pressed into stone, added to the harmony of oceans turned silent yet enduring. In some quarries, you can lean close and see shells intact, ammonites winding in their curling spirals, bivalves held like frozen mouths. They no longer open, they no longer sound, but they remain as symbols of what they once sang. The percussive snap of shells closing, the grinding of movement across the seabed, the quiet resonance of creatures breathing salt and light. Their music is inaudible now, but in vision, in imagination, it is heard again. Fossilized choirs become choirs once more within us. And what of silence in these seas now stone? They feel mute at first, but the truth is different. Silence is only the transformation of sound into another register, too low or too long for us to hear. The very minerals of chalk and limestone are resonances frozen into form, vibrations solidified until they no longer move. The choir is present, only playing in timescales beyond sense. To imagine cliffs humming is not fantasy. It is recognition that stone itself carries resonance, if only in rhythms beyond our scale. Could it be that Earth composes its most patient harmonies this way? Through the endless accumulation of shells, bones, debris. What once seemed like silence, like loss, gradually revealed as architecture of sound stored in matter itself. Oceans of bone, oceans of shell, oceans built into the curve of hills, the upright face of cliffs, the blocks of cities carved from ancient seabeds. We live inside the choir, often without knowing it. And yet, if oceans can be raised into cliffs, if shells can become chalk, if bone can endure as stone, then how many hidden choirs have we already walked upon without listening, mistaking their music for silence, when in truth, the earth was still singing beneath our feet? The cliffs of chalk and the choirs of ancient seas seem at first to belong entirely to the past, but the earth's music has never ceased. Even in places that feel silent, where air thins and the world pauses in stillness, hidden rhythms continue. Beneath glaciers, beneath sheets of ice covering valleys and continents, a pulse endures, the grinding of stone against stone, the slow movement of rivers concealed under frozen weight. It is time's deep drumbeat, slowed until it almost disappears, and yet shaping the world with every measure. Glaciers move with unbearable patience. To the eye, they look fixed, unmoving walls of blue and white, monuments of cold that seem eternal. But they flow. Their bodies shift downslope under their own weight, their undersides dragging across rock, carving valleys, grinding mountains into flour, scattering sediments across vast plains. Each creek, each rupture, each hidden slide is a note. The earth drums not with mallets or hands, but with ice pressed against bedrock, notes stretched into millennia. To hear it requires a different kind of listening, one that moves beyond the speed of daily perception. Scientists place seismographs on ice sheets, and they detect vibrations we cannot feel. Low, thunderous tones that ripple through the crust as glaciers shift. They detect sudden cracks, ice quakes. When deep fissures form, releasing energy like muted cymbals beneath snow, they record the rhythmic rush of subglacial rivers, water pressing forward under the heavy lid of ice, reshaping rock in secrecy. What seems to us like silence is in truth a constant percussion, faint but steady, shaping continents note by note. Consider the U-shaped valleys of Norway, of the Alps, of the Rockies. Their forms are music left behind, chords etched into stone by glaciers long retreated. Once, rivers alone shaped V-shaped cuts through mountains, but when ice arrived, it transformed the scale. The grinding of glaciers deepened and widened valleys into smooth arcs, their shapes the silent record of drumming carried out over tens of thousands of years. Even after the ice melts, the pulse lingers in the landscape, memory stored not in sound but in form. Glacial flour, the fine powder left behind by grinding ice, drifts into rivers and lakes, turning their waters milky and opaque. These sediments nourish distant oceans, carrying minerals across planetary distances. Here again, the drum is not destruction but transformation. Mountains beaten down into nourishment for seas, stone shifted into particles that begin new chords in other places. Even hidden beneath silence, glaciers feed the greater symphony. At the poles, this pulse is still ongoing. Antarctica holds rivers beneath its immense shield of ice, flowing in complete darkness, unseen by any creature. They move slowly, carving channels, transporting sediments, rearranging what lies beneath. To imagine it is to hear an underground orchestra, one that plays without light, without audience, its rhythm measured in centuries. It does not matter whether anyone listens. The music persists, the pulse continues, and there is something humbling about how ice both preserves and effaces. In glaciers, bubbles of ancient air remain trapped for hundreds of thousands of years, storing past atmospheres as transparent notes. When drilled and studied, those bubbles reveal carbon levels, temperatures, greenhouse gases. They let us hear the breath of vanished climates. Yet the ice that holds them also advances and erases, scraping entire landscapes clean, covering forests, soil, rivers, burying them in stillness. The drum both remembers and forgets. It preserves the atmosphere but removes what lies beneath its weight. In this balance of silence and preservation, the Earth's rhythm deepens. Entropy folds here in ice again, an inevitable fading. Glaciers themselves, vast though they seem, recede. Their drumbeat does not last forever. Warming thins them, climate cycles shrink them. Rivers beneath them grow stronger, faster, noisier. Even as glaciers disappear, they play their final rhythms more loudly. The crack of calving icebergs, the sudden thunder of collapse as shelves break into the sea. It is their coda, their last reverberation before silence. But silence is never final, for what remains is carved valley, smooth stone, scattered sediment, the memory of the beat pressed into Earth's body. Could it be that the deepest drumming of the planet is meant not for human ears at all, but for the Earth itself, a slow heartbeat ensuring continuity, writing time not in moments but in forms? We speak of glaciers as if they are fragile, temporary, and yet for millions of years, they have shaped continents, rearranged coastlines, sent rivers outward to build fertile plains. Their silence is not weakness. It is discipline, endurance, persistence, the capacity to create change on scales too vast for us to sense except in retrospect. And so the pulse beneath ice and stone continues. We walk in valleys carved by vanished glaciers. We drink from rivers fed by subglacial streams. We live in climates tuned by the rhythms of ice sheets advancing and retreating. Whether we notice it or not, we move to their tempo, our histories folded into their silence. And yet, If glaciers can carry hidden cadences, if rivers beneath ice can drum unceasingly in the dark, then how many other rhythms of the earth are still vibrating out of sight, weaving their patient tempos beneath the silence we assume is complete? The glaciers drum beneath ice, carving slow rhythms into stone. But when the ice recedes and the great percussion softens, what remains? Dust, echoes, fragments so faint they can be missed if we do not lean close enough to listen. And perhaps it is in these faint hums, in the subtle resonance of fossils, in drifting particles of ash and sand, that the earth offers its gentlest wisdom. Not in loud eruptions, not in thunderous quakes, but in whispers nearly lost. Dust is persistence in disguise. A speck of volcanic ash, lifted by wind and carried across half the globe, settles far from the mountain it came from. A fragment of pollen from a vanished forest rests in sediments beneath a modern lake. A bone ground into microscopic grains reappears as soil that nourishes new plants. Each fragment reminds us that nothing disappears completely. It drifts, it transforms, it waits. To look at dust and imagine it as nuisance is to miss its story. Every mote is a fragment of memory, carrying with it the trace of something older, something lived and lost. In such smallness, there is continuity. Echoes work in the same way. A sound fades into distance, losing clarity, but not erasing itself entirely. Canyons return our voices softly, shifted, elongated, reminding us that sound is never fully gone. It travels, disperses, lingers faintly before dissolving into still air. Fossils are echoes made physical. They hold shapes without breath, outlines without voice, yet the suggestion of sound persists in them. Look at a feather encased in amber, and you can almost hear the movement of air around wings. Hold an ammonite, and you can almost sense the seas in which it swam, the hush and rush of waves pressing against its spiral shell. These are echoes, not of sound alone, but of presence. Perhaps the wisdom here is patience. Dust and echo tell us that what endures does not shout. It does not demand. It settles quietly, trusting that those who care enough to look or to listen will hear it. In a culture that yearns for immediacy, the earth is teaching something different. The endurance of subtle things, the art of listening to silence, the value of whispers. It slows us down, reminding us that meaning does not only live in loudness or clarity. Sometimes it lives in residue, in faintness, in what seems almost lost. We carry echoes within ourselves too. Memory fades, details dissolve, voices soften until we no longer recall them exactly. And yet something remains. The feeling of a place we once knew. The warmth of someone's presence. It is not precise, not clear, but it is enough. We live with echoes every day, and yet rarely name them as such. The earth, in dust and fossil, does the same. It remembers imperfectly, incompletely, but it remembers. In those faint echoes there is both humility and beauty, the recognition that to preserve everything is impossible, but to preserve something is enough. Could it be that forgotten wisdom is not lost at all, only quieted, waiting for us to slow down and notice? The dust carried across continents tells us how worlds are connected. The echoes of stone remind us that sound, like presence, always lingers longer than we imagine. The fossil hum beneath our fingertips reminds us that silence still carries voice. It may take us years, lifetimes, to learn how to listen properly, but the earth is patient. It has been teaching this lesson for eons. That wisdom often hides in what barely calls attention to itself. And perhaps that is the greatest art of listening we are invited into. Not the search for clarity or volume, but the willingness to sit with subtlety, to receive fragments, to honor echoes as though they were music still. The earth remembers softly. To hear it, we must attune ourselves to quietness itself. And yet, if dust and echo carry so much forgotten wisdom, how much more is still scattered in silences around us, waiting to be heard, not loudly, but faintly, urging us to remember the patience of the planet? Dust carries wisdom, echoes remind us that nothing fades entirely, and fossils stand as silent choruses of what once breathed. But if every fossil was once a voice, where does that voice go? The bone, the shell, the feather, it becomes stone. The living breath it carried dissolves into the air, into soil, into silence. And yet something remains, a trace that reminds us who, or what, was once here. It humbles us to realize that fossils are fragments of vanished identity, written not in language but in mineral persistence. To hold a fossil is to hold absence made present. A spiral ammonite, pressed into rock, no longer spins through the sea but lingers as an imprint of what once was. The shape survives, but the creature does not. Identity, it seems, is translated differently through time. The material dissolves, the breath disperses, but the pattern persists. Consider this: our own bones and bodies are destined for the same transition. With patience, with rare chance, we too could become fossils, our bodies impressed into stone, our identities reduced to outlines, whispers, incomplete but enduring. It is a strange comfort and a strange sorrow. The fossil does not remember the voice as it truly was. It does not recall hunger or joy, instinct or survival. Yet it insists that a voice once existed. It is a reminder of something that breathed, that lived a day under the sun, that belonged to Earth's unfolding story. So much is lost, but not everything. The fossil is presence within absence. Perhaps our own identities move the same way. Over time, memory distorts, names vanish, yet something of us persists, passed down not in whole but in fragment. A voice, softened into echo, still felt even when words are forgotten. Survival in stone is not perfection. It is humbleness. Fossils do not cling to everything, they offer only glimpses. They remind us that identity need not be eternal in order to matter. Even fragments can hold meaning. Even silence can hold voice. In this, fossils mirror our own lives, our own impermanence. We too will settle into dust, and dust, carried by winds, will remind future worlds that we once sang as well. Perhaps there is wisdom here, that identity itself is less about permanence and more about resonance. Just as fossils are remembered for their imprint, not their living form, perhaps what defines us is not the completeness of who we are, but the resonance we leave behind, in others, in matter, in memory. We may not endure as fully ourselves, but parts of us will. The laughter we cause, the soil we change, the trace of carbon from our breath folded into air, all of it continues in countless subtle ways. Our identity, too, becomes mineral, dispersed, diffused, collected as fragment. And isn't that what the earth has always shown us? That nothing is ever preserved fully, but always in pieces. That fossils are echoes. That sediments are diaries in dust. That memory requires imagination to complete. So too with us. One day silence will hold our voices, but silence does not erase them. It transforms them into subtler notes within a larger choir. Could it be that to live is to be written into Earth's memory, whether or not we desire it, whether or not we notice it? That even as our breath escapes us, even as we fade from recollection, the fragments endure? In a way, we are already fossils in motion, already future echoes in the making. Identity is not lost but transcribed, translated, revoiced by the planet itself. And so we breathe, we speak, we sing for a short time. Then, like all before us, we fall into silence. But fossils remind us that silence is not nothing. Silence is breath held in stone. Silence is voice endured beyond voice. Identity may dissolve, but in doing so, it becomes part of Earth's patient memory. And yet, if every fossil was once a voice, and every silence can still hold identity, then when the Earth listens back through its stone and dust, what music of us will it hear lingering, faint but present, in that long exhalation of time? If fossils are breath turned to stone, reminders of identity preserved in silence, then extinction on the scale of worlds becomes something greater. A pause so wide it breaks the rhythm itself. Not every cycle continues. Not every harmony flows uninterrupted. There are moments in Earth's symphony when the song thins to silence, when entire movements end, and when the planet itself seems to stop, holding a breath within stone and sky. These are the great pauses, cycles broken. The end of the Jurassic was one such pause. Life went on, yes, but the tempo shifted. Entire groups of creatures, marine reptiles, great ammonites, Forests spread wide, reached crescendos only to stop, their melodies folding into silence. The seas fell quieter, the forests leaned into reshaping. Others took their place, but never in the same tones, never in the same key. Change always continues, but continuity is not guaranteed. There are times when silence itself is written into the Earth's score. These great pauses are vast resets. Volcanoes disgorge unimaginable volumes of ash, dimming sunlight, cooling worlds into stillness. Oceans retreat and then surge forward again, rewriting coastlines, erasing entire environments in the span of geological minutes. Asteroids strike, altering not only surface but climate, shaking the rhythm so violently that existing songs cannot resume. When the world silences in this way, ecosystems collapse, choirs vanish, entire melodies that played for millions of years end before their next refrain. And yet, silence makes room. Just as a pause in music prepares for the next note, a broken cycle invites new chords. In the quiet after the Jurassic, other species emerged into the vacancy. The mammals were small then, still faint in presence, but they carried rhythm the dinosaurs had never played. Birds filled the skies with notes different than their reptilian ancestors. Forests evolved into new patterns, symphonies in tones unfamiliar. The silence between was not permanent. It was stage light dimming before it rose again. But there is something haunting in these breaks. What we look back upon as transition was, for those creatures, an ending. For ammonites, there was no future symphony. For certain forests, no return. The memory of them remains in fossils, but their voices never did resume. To imagine this is to realize the fragility of continuity. Cycles feel eternal when we are inside them, yet they are always vulnerable to pause. Perhaps this is the truest lesson of deep time. No rhythm is guaranteed. Climates tremble, seas withdraw, forests vanish, stars shift in our night sky. The great pauses are reminders that permanence is illusion. Continuity is always conditional, always awaiting the next rest in the score. Our own rhythms, our civilizations, our species are no different. We feel steady, as if the chord of our presence will play endlessly. But the score itself is larger, stretching beyond us, marking pauses we cannot yet predict. There is humility in silence, and there is also opportunity. The earth shows us that when one movement ends, another begins. Those who come after may not even imagine the voices that came before, yet their own chords are real and vibrant. Perhaps this is why silence plays such a profound part in the planetary score. Without rests, there can be no new voices. Without endings, no beginnings. Cycles must be broken for music to reshape itself. So where do we stand now in relation to those pauses? Perhaps within one already forming. Perhaps within a brief interval before rhythms realign. Or perhaps we are only imagining it, sensing faint silences in the air and seeing reflections of our own fears. The end of the Jurassic reminds us that every ending, when seen from within, feels like permanence, but when viewed through the lens of deep time, it becomes momentary, an interval, a necessary rest. Could it be that silence itself is part of the Earth's wisdom? That we, impatient listeners, resist it simply because we crave continuity? To listen to the pauses is to recognize their importance. For the great pauses deepen the symphony, stripping it of excess, giving space for what has not yet been imagined. Silence is not brokenness. It is possibility. And yet, if even the mighty age of the Jurassic came to its rest, if cycles we assume eternal can break so suddenly, what other vast silences are still ahead of us, waiting on the edge of the score, preparing the stage for musicians we cannot yet conceive? Every pause on Earth, every silence written into cliffs and seas, reminds us that endings are never complete, they are transformations. And when we look deep enough at stone, at fossils, at the very minerals beneath our feet, we discover a truth that extends far beyond our planet. The music began long before Earth existed at all. Stardust composed the opening harmony here. Stardust is what became oceans and shells, mountains and marrow. Even fossils, pressed into cliffs, trace their ancestry to supernovae, to the explosions of stars long forgotten. Earth's music is not just planetary, it is cosmic. Every atom in calcium and carbon, every oxygen molecule we breathe, every isotope we measure in stone was forged in fire older than Earth itself. Stars lived, burned, collapsed, and in their deaths scattered the material of worlds into the cosmos. Dust, rich with elements, filled clouds of gas that cooled, spun, and formed into planets. What we consider Earth's deepest geology is, at its root, recycled song, the echoes of stellar cores still vibrating in stone and ocean. The choir began in silence, burst into fire, scattered into dust, then reassembled as this habitable world. When we press a fossil into our palm, we are holding not only the memory of a creature but the condensed memory of stars. The calcium of bones, the iron of blood, the phosphates of DNA, all of it belongs to cycles older and grander than any terrestrial history. In us, and in every living thing, the harmony of stellar dust continues. Even the fragments we call ashes of time are not final. They are transitional, endlessly returning, folding themselves back into the score of becoming. Our planet sings with these remnants constantly. Volcanoes exhale gases born of primordial dust, reshaped into minerals. Winds scatter microscopic particles that once drifted in stellar clouds. Oceans dissolve elements that carry memory of stellar fires. Life itself is the temporary arrangement of cosmic notes into breaths, movements, voices. The very music we hear in forest canopies or ocean choirs is sung in instruments crafted from starborn dust. Listening to Earth, we are always listening to a cosmic chorus, slowed and softened into forms that feel familiar. And just as stars give matter, they also reclaim it. Our sun, in its distant future, will alter tone and pressure, its outer layers drifting away, enriching the galaxy once more with elements to form new worlds. Stars become dust again, dust becomes stars again. It is rhythm without conclusion. Fossils, sediments, cities, even our own bodies will eventually scatter into this endless cycle. Their silence may feel final, but in time, their particles will be rearranged into new harmonies, voices we cannot imagine, in worlds we cannot foresee. Perhaps this is why dust feels so haunting. It is not only memory of the past but also material of the future. The same grain that once belonged to an ammonite shell could one day belong to the skeleton of a new life on another shore. A particle of calcium in our own bones could return to the heavens, drifting until it helps spark another system. Nothing is wasted. Nothing is lost. What fades here becomes voice elsewhere. When you stand beneath the stars on a still night and watch their unbroken silence, remember that you are part of their choir too. Your breath contains stardust, your blood carries it, your bones are structured by it. We are participants as much as listeners. The cosmic music has flowed through stars, through stones, through fossils, and now through us. Perhaps our wonder at the night sky is recognition of kinship, that we are hearing music we already belong to, music written into the matter of our bodies. Stardust becoming stars, stars becoming dust. It is Earth's lesson carried beyond its surface, that memory is eternal, not as form but as cycle, not as preserved voice but as reassembled harmony, which suggests something profound, that every silence, no matter how deep, is only temporary. Silence itself becomes the instrument through which the next song begins. And yet, if even fossils and cliffs trace back to stars, if every atom of our identity is already a fragment of the cosmos, then what vast music is still being written beyond us, beyond Earth, waiting to emerge once the dust of our own age drifts outward into the glow of other skies. Dust becomes stars, stars become dust again. The cycle is infinite, yet even with an endless recycling, another truth persists. All songs fade, melodies blur, harmonies dissolve, memory itself falters. This fading is the hand of entropy upon remembrance. Not cruel, not rushed, only inevitable. Every note struck in deep time eventually dissolves into a silence too vast to resist. And yet, in that quiet dissolution, there remains beauty. Like a final chord suspended in the air after the musicians have stopped playing, resonance lingers in the heart long after the sound has gone. Memory blurs just as landscapes blur. A mountain loses its sharp edges to wind and rain. A fossil erodes into shards, then soil, until the shape once preserved is no longer legible. Sediments fold upon each other, compressing until their clarity is hidden deep beneath layers. Even within our own minds, the same rule unfolds. Faces once sharp in recollection grow soft. Stories we tell over time gain flourishes never present in the original. Memory transforms itself, not because it desires to forget, but because forgetting is written into the fabric of remembering. Entropy does not erase completely, it diffuses. It changes sound into echo, echo into vibration, vibration into silence. To live in time is to watch the edges dissolve. Yet as memory fades, it gives rise to something else. Resonance. What we forget in detail sharpens in feeling. The shape may blur, but the sense of having heard, of having seen, of having lived, that often deepens. What remains is not the accuracy of the past, but its impression, its afterglow, its emotional chord. Consider the Jurassic. We cannot reconstruct its forests precisely. We cannot recall the exact calls of its creatures nor the chemistry of its atmosphere in total detail. Entropy has blurred too much. Yet something persists, a sense of it, threaded through fossils and isotopes, through sediments and stone architecture. Enough remains that we can imagine. Enough lingers that the age is not erased but resonant. Its memory is imperfect, but the impression is strong. Its song lives through fragments, and the fragments are enough to awaken wonder. Perhaps this is memory's deeper role, not to guard every detail against entropy, but to ensure that something remains even as most drifts away. A flower dries and loses its scent, yet its pressed form can still remind us. A song heard long ago may lose its exact notes but remain lodged in the heart as rhythm or feeling. Memory is always incomplete, yet the incompleteness emphasizes what mattered most. Entropy refines memory, whitening the noise, leaving behind only what continues to move us. This too the earth teaches us. Fossils offer only fragments, but in them we sense a whole age. Dust carries only traces, but in those grains, entire migrations are hinted. Isotopes fade steadily, yet their ratios still hum enough to tell us about vanished climates. Decay reduces, yes, but still allows resonance to pass across time. The memory of the world is always fractured, blurred, half-heard, but through the blur we glimpse the whole. Could it be that beauty itself depends on this? If every chord lasted forever, if no song ever ended, how could resonance exist? How could we feel the ache of what passes, the sweetness of what remains? Entropy makes music fragile, but in doing so, it makes listening tender. We lean closer to echoes because they fade. We hold on to fossils because they are rare. We treasure memory not because it is perfect, but because it slips away. In this way, entropy is not only a destroyer but a composer of endings. It allows the world to thin into silence, shaping pauses that hold meaning in their absence. The Jurassic faded. Civilizations have faded. Our own lives will fade. Yet the resonance of them travels forward, like vibrations through stone, like faint songs humming beneath silence. The end is not final. It is transition into a subtler register. So we learn to live not against entropy, but with it as part of the symphony. Every voice will dissolve, but every dissolution leaves behind resonance in the heart of the world. Perhaps memory itself is not in details, not in permanence, but in the lingering emotion entropy cannot erase, the quiet hum, still vibrating, in the silence that follows. And yet, if all songs blur and dissolve, if entropy carries even memory into silence, what will remain at the farthest horizon of time? Will there still be resonance, however faint, or will silence itself be the final chorus, the last music of all? As memory blurs under entropy, some places remain like quiet instruments, holding echoes more faithfully than most. Lakes are among these. On the surface, they appear as mirrors, calm plains of water reflecting clouds and mountains. But beneath their stillness they are recorders, receivers of time. Lakes trap what drifts from the air, pollen, volcanic ash, fragments of dust, whispers of rainfall. Layer after layer, they gather what the sky releases, quietly archiving atmospheres long gone. In their sediments, stored grain by grain, lie entire histories, not just of the waters themselves, but of the skies that breathed above them for ages. If you could travel down into the mud at the bottom of a lake, you would move through time as if leafing through pages of a hidden book. At the top, the freshest moments. Pollen from a pine wood near the shore, traces of soot from recent fires, tiny fragments of meteor dust still shining faintly. Deeper down, the years unfold backward. Forests that once flourished but now have retreated, grasses spreading after ice, clear markers of droughts or floods. Push further still, and the record carries you beyond memory, into the climates of vanished epochs, air held as fine chemical signatures, even traces of volcanic eruptions that blacken the sky above the Jurassic seas. Scientists call these lake layers varves, seasonal sheets of sediment that fall steadily, year after year. Light in the summer, dark in the winter, the cycle repeats like a quiet metronome of the earth itself. Unlike rivers, which rush and scatter, or oceans, which churn and bury, lakes are steadier in their patience. They allow what falls from the sky to settle gently, to rest without disturbance, to be sealed. In this way, lakes are the planet's soft archivists, not just reflecting the sky above but remembering it, storing the breath of vanished air and the dust of passing ages. It is strange, almost haunting, to think that by drilling into lake beds, we can touch skies long gone, pollen released by forests no human has ever seen, rainfall from climates entirely unlike our own, ash clouds from eruptions witnessed only by dinosaurs. Lakes carry these voices wordlessly, and even unchanged, they whisper back whenever we look closely enough. What seems only silence on the surface, the slow ripple of wind, the still glass of dawn, is in truth resonance thinly disguised as calm. Perhaps this is why lakes are so often associated with reflection, not only in their surface, which turns day into mirror, but in their function, which gathers time itself. To sit by the shore of a lake is to feel that time has slowed or folded. A dragonfly that lands on the water is only one moment, but beneath it lies pollen centuries deep. Each ripple travels over centuries worth of memory below. Lakes invite reflection because they themselves are records, quiet pools listening more than speaking, carrying what would otherwise be blown away. And yet, even lakes are not eternal. They fill with sediment, shallowing over time, eventually becoming meadows or bogs. Their record ends or shifts or closes. As entropy softens mountains and forests, it also consumes lakes' patience. Some memories are buried beyond reach, compressed until indistinguishable. Even then, fragments persist, compacted, transformed, eventually joined into stone. So even as they fade, lakes join the broader symphony, carrying their sky records into deeper strata where other forms of memory await. Could it be that memory itself prefers these fragile vessels? That skies, unable to preserve themselves, find refuge in waters that trap their whispers? Even rain, as fleeting as it is, can leave its mark. Chemicals encased within shelved sediments, tiny isotopic traces signaling whether that rainfall was warm or cold, abundant or rare. The atmosphere itself may forget, but lakes remember. They remember faithfully, quietly, almost invisibly, until we notice. There is a lesson in this patience. Just as fossils remind us that identity can endure in stone, and dust reminds us that even fragments are enough to carry history, lakes teach us that stillness is memory's ally. To remember, perhaps, requires a kind of calm, a willingness to let things settle, to rest without disturbance, to layer gently until the shape of years becomes visible. Our own memories, scattered by noise and movement, might last longer if we learned from lakes, to allow what matters to settle, to be held quietly within, to form layers that survive even when the surface looks empty. And yet, if lakes can remember skies for thousands, even millions of years, then how many other atmospheres, how many forgotten weathers, how many vanished climates are still carried beneath dark waters, archived in silence, waiting for someone to listen with the patience of stone? The lakes remind us that even skies can be remembered, their whispers carried into sediment, their voices preserved in layers of stillness. But not every memory lies in silence. Some sing still, alive and present, resonating with music born in ages long gone. To hear them, we need not lean over a fossil, nor examine isotopes, nor walk the cliffs of chalk seas. We need only step outside, listen to the air, and hear the voices of creatures that never entirely left the Jurassic. Birds are living fossils, and their songs are echoes of a vanished orchestra. It is easy to forget this. Birds feel so ordinary to us. Sparrows in city streets, gulls wheeling above the coast, songbirds at dawn filling the air with sound too familiar to stir daily awe. Yet every chirp, every flute-like call, every harsh cry carries resonance from deep time. They stand in direct lineage to dinosaurs, feathers etched not as novelty but as inheritance, wings evolved from grasping forelimbs, bones lightened by air sacs first present in reptilian ancestors. We hear them now as birds, but long ago, their calls were part of a wider chorus that filled the Jurassic skies. When a robin sings at sunrise, when a hawk screams against a canyon, we are faintly returned into that vanished music. Think of the complexity of birdsong. Each species carries its motifs. Warbles, trills, echoes strung melodically across air. For millions of years, these songs have evolved, tuned by forests and winds, by the need to attract mates and defend territories. Scientists have discovered that bird calls vary with environment. Songs become higher in dense forests to pierce through canopy, lower in open plains where wind carries sound more easily. These adaptations reflect landscapes, just as Jurassic creatures once adapted their calls to ancient valleys and swamps. To hear a bird today is to hear not only its individual voice but the shape of environment itself, singing through memory. Amber fossils make this lineage visible. In some, feathers remain, delicate as if freshly fallen. Their structures whisper of insulation, of gliding, of shimmering displays gone silent. The very architecture of song is preserved within them. Hollow bones, syrinxes forming in anatomies that allowed unprecedented vocal range. Even if we cannot reconstruct the exact calls of dinosaur ancestors, the blueprint is there, etched into fossils and passed down to every bird alive today. In this way, fossils in motion sing with a continuity that fossils in stone cannot. And perhaps this is the most beautiful truth, that in birds, the Jurassic is not silent. Their wings beat air the same way ancient feathers did. Their voices vibrate with chords shaped by evolutionary memory. A nightingale's song may not match any creature of that distant epoch, but its lineage ties it there, bridging millions of years with air and bone. They are fragments of an old choir, still rehearsing, still evolving, still audible to us if we take the time to stop, to listen. Could it be that when we overlook birds as ordinary, as background sound, we are ignoring one of the clearest voices of Earth's deep past still alive among us? When a crow calls, harsh and resonant, we are hearing an echo of dinosaurs that once roamed forests too dense for us to imagine. When geese migrate overhead in long V-shapes, their honks layering across an autumn sky, we are witnessing choreography rehearsed since long before humanity appeared. Birds remind us that not all choirs of the past are locked beneath stone. Some are moving still, alive in the present, asking us to listen with attention. There is something humbling in realizing that we are surrounded each day by living fossils, and yet so few of us pause to absorb their voices. The urban sparrow is discounted as trivial. The common pigeon is dismissed as nuisance. Yet each is a continuation of survival across ages of extinction, ice, fire, drought, meteor, entropy. They hold within them resilience older than any human structure, memory flowing not in archives or sediments, but in living behavior, in feathers still warm with blood. To be present with them is to sit not only beside life, but beside persistence. And perhaps this is why dawn choruses stir the human spirit so deeply. At first light, when birds burst into song across forests and cities alike, filling silence with layered voices, we hear not only the start of a day but the persistence of continuity. Their symphony is far older than our species. It sang long before us, and it will likely go on after. We recognize it not only with ears but with something deeper, an unconscious recognition that this music carries memory we cannot touch, yet still feel. It is worth considering, too, what our role becomes. If these living fossils sing for us, how do we respond? Do we join their song with care, or drown them out in silence of our own making? Human cities are loud, but birds adapt. Some shift the pitch of their songs higher, piercing through the noise of traffic. Even here, in our disruptive rhythm, the old choir persists, adjusting itself to be heard. Memory insists on endurance. Identity, too, is folded into this. Birds are not only reflections of the past, they are mirrors for us. They show us what persistence looks like in motion, what memory feels like when it lives, breathes, adapts. They are not relics to study from glass cases. They are voices to join, if only by listening. In this way, they remind us that history is not entirely buried. Some of it passes through air daily, in flickers of feather and waves of sound. So next time you hear a bird at dawn or at dusk, remember the lineage stretching behind it. The song carried through silence, through extinction, through dust, through time. It is more than ambient noise. It is inheritance. It is echo. It is the Jurassic lingering just above us, stitched invisibly into the present with every note. And yet, if these living fossils still sing for us now, carrying a whisper of ancient symphonies, what other fragments of vanished eras might still be moving unseen around us? Memory not as stone nor as dust, but alive, waiting for us to notice? We have traveled across fossils and dust, through echoes of mountains and whispers of ancient skies, through rivers still singing, glaciers still drumming, and birds that carry voices of vanished dinosaurs. Each chapter has been a fragment of listening, a patient attempt to hear Earth in its many languages. Stone, silence, vibration, memory, decay, renewal. And now, at the edge of this journey, a final thought gathers like a low hum beneath all others. The song of the planet has never ended. The Jurassic was a movement in a larger work, a symphony still unfurling into time. To listen now, here and with breath in our lungs, is to realize that we are already inside music that continues to play. Symphonies are not heard from a single note. They unfold, movement after movement, changing key, layering instruments, shifting tone. Sometimes they rise into loud crescendos, sometimes they quiet into rests, but always they continue. The Triassic, the Jurassic, the Cretaceous, these were movements vast and distinct, yet none complete upon their own. Even the great extinctions were not finales, only passages of silence before another section began. Time is not a single melody but a weaving of themes, returning, evolving, fading, and rising again. The earth has always composed in this way, balancing destruction with creation, pauses with new chords, silence with new choruses swelling out of emptiness. Rivers dry, but new ones form. Forests fall, but meadows spread. Species vanish, others rise. Even what appears final, when heard at a greater scale, is never the end. Instead, it is transition, modulation, new bridges leading forward, new harmonies cresting on the edge of silence. Consider the Jurassic forests, those canopies of harps thrumming with insect and reptilian sound. That music ended. Many of its voices fell quiet. Many entire branches of evolution slipped into fossil silence. Yet the forest still plays, even now, under different names and different species, its strings woven into new chords. Pine and oak, bird and cicada, their music is altered, but it is continuous. Likewise with seas. Ammonites give way to whales, ichthyosaurs to dolphins, trilobites to crabs, the choir reshaping but never ceasing. The theme persists, transformed endlessly in the living score. And we, fragile, self-aware, momentary though we may be, are as much a part of the composition as any ammonite or fern, any glacier or dust storm. Our bones carry stardust. Our breath carries carbon that cycled through Jurassic air. Our cities already form strata that will one day read as another verse. We are not standing outside the orchestra looking in. We are inside it, participants, resonance, percussion. Every step upon stone is a note added quietly, whether we notice or not. To realize this is to feel both humility and belonging. Humility because our lives are so brief, one fleeting motif in a piece that stretches across unimaginable time. We may hear only fragments, recalling only echoes, constructing illusions from fossils and sediments. Yet even in our incompleteness we belong. Belonging because we, too, are sound. Our languages, our songs, our movements across continents, all of them join Earth's resonance. Perhaps in the far future, these will fade into static, reduced to fragments, eroded and transformed. But as with every echo before, something will remain, folded into the score. Entropy ensures every note softens. Memory guarantees not all can be lost. Between these opposites, the music continues, always shifting, never complete. Our fossils in motion, the birds, remind us of continuity. Our technofossils remind us of legacy. The dust of deserts drifting into rainforests, the isotopes silently ticking time, the glaciers beating their patient drums, all remind us that the earth is never still, never silent, never done. Could it be that the act of listening itself is part of the symphony? That when we lean towards silence, pressing fossils into our palms, tracing the lines and cliffs, or simply pausing to watch dust lit golden in a shaft of evening light, we are playing our role. Not analysts, not outsiders, but listeners, a part of the whole open to its resonance. Listening is never passive. To listen is to join. To hear the unfinished symphony of Earth is to understand that our very awareness tunes us into its measures. We are instruments resonating in sympathy with it. The Jurassic was never the whole. Neither is now. Neither will be whatever future follows us. Every movement, every pause, every silence, every crescendo folds into something greater. Perhaps the Earth's true song is not meant to be heard all at once, but only lived within one breath, one lifetime, one species at a time. Perhaps the only way to experience such an immense composition is to become a note inside it, uncertain, brief, but necessary for the whole. Even as entropy fades the edges, even as memory blurs the details, resonance persists. The cliffs still stand, the birds still sing, the dust still circulates, the stars still scatter themselves into future worlds. It may be that the ending never truly comes, only transformations, pauses, alterations in key. The work continues, unfinished. To know this, to rest with this, is to find peace. And so we arrive here at no conclusion, only a realization. The Earth's symphony is not yet over. We are inside its music now. The Jurassic was a movement, not the grand finale. The silence between stars and stones is only the rest between phrases. Our bones, our dust, our breath will one day join the chorus, and the world will go on composing, weaving our resonance into the endless score. And yet, if to live is to sing within this great unfinished song, what would it mean to truly pause and listen, not just to the echoes of the past, but to the music still unfolding around us, right now, in every river, every stone, every note of wind?